the arts and showcase the work that had been done and what they hope to do with Old Town Hall. Less than 1 year later, in August of this year, Senator Harckham called to tell me that we would be receiving a $200,000 grant for Old Town Hall. This grant will be instrumental in buttoning up the building envelope. The Southeast Museum will be the recipient of restored windows, making it easier and more efficient to heat and cool the entire second floor. The Old Town Hall will be a step closer to a third-floor theater, which, when complete, will open up many possibilities for Main Street. We are so grateful to the Senator, and we wanted to thank him personally at one of our meetings. No one works harder to revitalize our main streets and improve the quality of life in all our towns. Please welcome Senator Pete Harckham.
Thank you, Councilwoman Eckhart, honorable board members, Mr. Supervisor, Madam Clerk. When I saw this project, I immediately bought into the vision that all of you have, and with your nonprofit partners. It really is a gem. I guess in the old days they would say it's got great bones, and one can really imagine what that will be like once it's fully restored to its luster and what it can do to this community. So I was happy to pitch in and do my part. Thus far, we brought $1.5 million in grants and economic activity to Putnam County, and that does include the extra $1 million we got for the Brewster School District, as well as $50,000 for Brewster for their police car. So we're really focused on Putnam County. In this off session, we're working very closely on legislation to kind of fill the gaps dealing with eutrophication and excess phosphorus, and something that's where I know the supervisor from. Back when I was a county legislator, we first started working on these phosphorus issues and our lakes. So we'll have more news to report there. And I guess the last thing that I would want to report is, as the chair of the Committee on Alcoholism and Substance Abuse, I'm the co-chair of the State Senate Task Force on Opioids, and we've been traveling the state, meeting with community health officials, treatment professionals, family and patient advocates. We have 2 more public hearings, one in Buffalo, one in Albany. We had a very large one right here in Carmel. It was an all-day symposium, and at the end of the year we'll be submitting our report, and then some legislation in January. I know this is a crisis that has impacted all of us, regardless of age, race, income, urban, rural, suburban. So we continue to partner with our communities on issues like that. And I look forward to working with you on any other issues that you may have. I love the partnership. I love the collaboration. And anything we can do to help, feel free to holler. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, prior to opening the public hearing, I'm going to make an announcement here on behalf of the town board. Over the past 4 decades, the town board has had a congenial relationship with the museum board. As is stated this past April, the town's generosity over the years has been indispensable. We agree, and that is why we're at a loss in understanding why we're in the position we are here with the museum currently. Let me clear up some misinformation that may be circulating around town. The Southeast Museum is separately chartered 501c3, not-for-profit, and not a town department as many think. The town provides the museum with $40,000 stipend, free rent, 3,738 square feet of prime floor space on the main street in the village of Brewster, and until this past month, an additional 532 square feet of prime storage space for its archives. Free water, free sewer, free electricity, free security system, free garbage, free parking to its patrons, a value over $93,824 annually. Over the past 19 years, the $40,000 stipend has amounted to well over $3.25 million and well over $1.7 million including in-kind services. As most of you are aware, the town has been engaged in a lengthy decade-plus project spearheaded by the Town of Southeast Culture Arts Coalition aimed at rejuvenating Old Town Hall, which you just heard about the grant for $200,000. The vision is to make the historic Old Town Hall a more usable asset for our entire community. The 2020 budget allocates the full $40,000 for the museum budget on 2 lines. You will find the budget the same $40,000 as last year, again on 2 lines. There are 2 major issues that drove the decision to allocate in this manner. Accountability. The town has received complaints from residents and tourists that the museum is not open at times during posted hours, signs are not consistently left out with notifications of closures, and telephones sometimes go unanswered during hours of operation. It's the town's understanding that the position of museum director is full-time, 37 hours a week, and is entitled to health benefits. Current hours of operation are 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. with an hour lunch, which equates to 4 hours per day or 20 hours per week. The sign on the museum also advertised that it is open from June to December. However, they are open from the 2nd week in June to the 2nd week in December, which equates to 27 weeks a year. If a local resident goes there and this takes place, they just say, "I'll go back later," and tourists say they don't have an option. The accounting belongs to the museum board and not the town board. However, we are the ones that receive the complaints. Relocation. What is the vision for 67 Main Street? Back in 2018, when the 3rd floor underwent a window renovation, the museum experienced excess amounts of dust. That dust was tested and results came back tested positive for lead. It was that experience which prompted the need for the town to change future renovation procedure. In the meantime, a grant had been obtained to replace the current windows on the museum level. I called a meeting and invited the museum board and the museum director. At that time, I told them that they would have to temporarily relocate during these renovations. Before we could even begin discussion how to proceed with the relocation, it came to my attention that the block building where the town and museum store items would need to be demolished due to structural issues. We briefly discussed potential sites, relocation, and I suggested we have a meeting in the near future after I had a chance to rethink my position. At our second meeting, I suggested that instead of a temporary move, not knowing the length of time it would take to renovate the windows on the 2nd floor space, I suggested the museum flip-flop space to the lower level permanently, as their current lease will expire in 4 years. The museum board flat out refused, stating they were not moving. They said, "Let me explain the rationale behind the move and what I believe to be the best for the building and its occupants." As I said, in 4 years, the lease for the space on the 2nd floor expires, and we will be in the same position we are here today, working toward a solution that works best for the building, and why not do it now? When the renovation of the 3rd floor commences, any dust and debris would potentially fall to the 2nd floor. Moving the museum to the lower level provides a whole floor barrier between the dust and debris that were produced during the renovation of the 3rd floor. Studio around the corner said that they were prepared to deal with it, while the museum has demonstrated that they were not. Studio around the corner has offered to help facilitate such move, and hope when this happens, many of you here tonight will lend a lending hand in your experience as well. With the loss of the block building, I offer the annex portion of the old town hall building to compensate for storage space that was lost. This would allow all the museum's possessions to be not only on one level, but in one building. This move would also allow the museum to be open all year round, as they would have heat and air conditioning, something they constantly point out about their current location. The museum also has 8 windows which are not conducive to display light-sensitive artifacts such as documents, clothing, etc. Moving to the lower level where there are no windows in prime display areas would give them more options for displaying these items without worry of light damage to them. The windows in the museum also inhibit the use of prime floor space. Moving to the lower level and not having these windows constraints will allow increased areas of display of the artifacts, and in a sense, even more display square footage. Also, between the 2nd and 3rd floor, there is an area that theatrical performers use as a changing area, which flows through the 2nd floor where the museum is currently located, and has historically been a concern of the museum regarding outside people having access to the area. Moving to the lower level would eliminate that as well. Bottom line, the museum said no to the move, and 2 of the primary reasons were the ceiling height was not the 12-foot of its current space, which would not enable to hang or display some artifacts in the same manner they do now. Currently, there are 2 displays that fit that category within the description: a canoe, which can be moved, and a Brewster Standard sign that, in my opinion, can be mounted to a wall and not hang from the ceiling. There are bearing walls in the basement that can't be removed. I believe the town and its residents' vision for decades has been to have 67 Main Street a cultural arts building, not just a museum, and is about to become a reality for our community. If the museum refuses to cooperate, window renovation in this space and construction of the third floor has to move forward regardless. Our town cannot afford to lose this grant for improvements to the iconic building. Years ago, Studio Around the Corner took the initiative and revitalized the area on the lower floor without the assistance of the town by fundraising and whatever other methods they could to improve the quality of the building. They have offered yet again to step up to the plate with this proposal, and hope many of you in the audience here tonight will as well. This building and its future depends on cooperation of the museum, as well as all of you here tonight, as well as all of you at home. This building should be a beacon that brings our community together and not divide us. The town to date has only heard from one member of the board regarding this proposal. Tonight again, we reach out to them to work with us and not against us. Many of you have come here tonight for this purpose. We look forward to your comments and that you have a better understanding of the situation. And I just want to give you a quick slideshow presentation if I could. I spoke about the sign earlier. It says Southeast Museum open June to December, Tuesday through Saturday. Again, when we receive phone calls, if they get there June 1st, I guess second week in June, I think this year was like the 8th or whatever, and it says December. Well, when someone reads the sign, they think they're open all of June and all of December. So that may be confusion on the public's part. We who live here in the town of Southeast, we kind of know better, maybe, I don't know. I didn't know what day in June until what day in December. Yet when a person from out of town, which we talk about tourism, they don't know that when they get there. Sometimes there's a sign on the door, sometimes there's not, and they go away unfulfilled. Here's the sign that is stating that it's open Tuesday through Saturday, which it does, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., closed 12 to 1. I know there are people that have a concern about those types of hours, closing in the middle of the day to take a lunch, and maybe rearrange the hours, maybe even open less, and participate more. This is the inside of the building, in case any of you haven't been there recently. It went through, they cleaned it pretty well about a year ago, spent about $16,000. Now this canoe is probably one of the items that causes the 12-foot high ceiling to be a reality for them. However, if they move downstairs, it wouldn't be able to be situated exactly that way, but we believe it could be used accordingly. This is more space as well. Now you can see here on the left-hand side of the picture, on this side here, the windows. Now that light bleeding through into this room is substantial. And if you'll notice, most museums do not have this type of lighting. So now when I say lighting, outside lighting, not inside lighting. And it also restricts any kind of a display being placed in front of it. And I'm just going to run through these quickly. Again, in this entire area, there's nothing there hanging from 12 foot. Now, right here in the back, there's a sign there that when you see it in a moment, that's the Brewster Standard. That could be taken down and placed on a wall. Again, just show you some quick pictures. I don't know if any of you have been there ever recently, but these are pretty new. Now there's the one sign, which again can be placed on the wall. If you took that sign down, those two windows, which don't appear downstairs, they could be put there, and there's a lot of space being wasted there because of the way it's situated. Again, this is the way the windows. This is a storage room, more storage, and I think that's like an office that they use, another office used, and a bathroom. Now, downstairs, this is the area that I believe is suitable. One, it has air conditioning units and it has heat in this building, which allow them to be open longer hours. Maybe they don't longer hours, more days. But they can be open during the summertime, they can be open during the wintertime, and it looks like a very clean space. Now this is a studio around the corner, which is the third floor. Now a lot of people don't like to use the word basement, lower level. You know what? I'll go anywhere if it's nice, and this space, I believe, is nice. Now, This place was not the best when Studio Around the Corner took it over. They did a tremendous job. Again, with the black ceilings, I think it looks good enough for a museum. I think there's plenty of space. And this is not all the space. This is a portion of the space that they have. And the town is willing to work with them to make this space inhabitable and better. We've made the offer, but no takers as yet. This here door and this wall here and this wall here are bearing walls. It's the only bearing wall in the entire downstairs. All 3 levels of this building have the same square footage. So don't say that they're not going to have the same space. They'll have the equal space that they have upstairs. The only thing is the height of the ceiling is approximately 8'6" as opposed to 12 foot. I might be off by an inch or 2, so excuse me if I have the exact number wrong. And again, if any of you have ever been down to Studio Around the Corner, they have generated a tremendous amount of traffic in this building, a tremendous amount. And nothing against the museum, but I bet you it's 5 to 10, even greater times. There's many programs down there, very well attended by people. They gave me some pictures to use, which I will not use because the room is packed with people. I didn't use it because, again, usually you have to get permission of the person if they see their face on the screen, and we didn't have the money to do it. And I also got a letter this week, I'm a cheap guy. Well, guess what? I don't pay for FaceTime. Now, this gentleman here happens to be, I got permission from him to use his picture. These 2 people, you can't tell who they are, but it's really a nice space. I mean, I think it is. I mean, you have an opportunity to look, you can go down there. We all love the museum. We all love Studio Around the Corner, and I just think somehow we got to make this work. Again, more space. Now, the building stays the same. The sign that says Southeast Museum, how come it's not jump? The sign right there, Southeast Museum, stays right there. It has an arrow pointing down around the back. Right now, this door says Southeast Museum. It does not, I don't believe it opens. They don't use that door. They use the one on the side, which I'll show you in a minute. This sign stays the same. The only thing that's going to change is where they actually locate. Now that there is the main entrance for the museum. Again, the main entrance to the museum. And this here is the proposed entrance where it's now Studio Around the Corner, and instead of being Studio Around the Corner, be Museum Around the Corner, which could be right here. They can change the signage. Studio Around the Corner can keep their name and be around the corner of the front of the building, I guess. Now this here is the block building. This is the block building that had just recently been demolished by the town. There's a bunch of cracks here, here, up in here. We had it inspected, and the results of the engineer's inspection said it should be demolished almost immediately. It took us about a month to get everything arranged. It is now down, and the museum occupied approximately 25% of the space in the building. It's 2 stories, and this here inside, this here to the back of the building on that lower part was what the museum had, where they had artifacts stored, a desk, and the town uses this here, and we have storage upstairs, and underneath the building is where we've had storage. We've lost a tremendous amount of storage. I'm going to have to make a proposal to the town board in the next, probably second meeting from tonight, to identify what I'd like to do with that building. Again, that would be my idea, put it in front of the board. I'm quite sure they're going to say no, but I'm at least going to ask them and make a recommendation of how to replace that building. Now, what we give the museum, in addition to that, where they used to have to walk across the street here, this portion. So here's the building that they currently occupy with the square footage. We offered them, with this proposal, to give them that area there and all this area here for their storage. They will be on the same floor, and they'll be on the same level, no walking across the street in the rain if necessary, and all that space has been offered to them to compensate for what they were going to lose on that side of the building. And again, if they're up on the second level, it's more convenient to be down here and have one floor, easy access, easy flow. Now, this is the floor plan for the building. Those little yellow things, 1, 2, 3, 4, when they built the building back in 1896, I believe is the date, those were the primary ones. So on the upper floor, I didn't show that, but they don't have those supports because they're not supporting anything on the first floor. So this floor here is the museum, and this floor here showed the same points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And like I said earlier, this is a bearing wall. That's the only thing that separates the two spaces, which can be used for many, many things. All these petitions here are not bearing walls, and that can all come down and be part of an even bigger area. And like I said, there's no windows. There's one little window, I think, right over in here, but otherwise there's no windows, so it gives them a lot extra space to display their artifacts. Now, this is just a copy of a budget. Sorry. This is a copy of the budget. It shows the $40,000. It shows $12,000 here. That's on page 26 of the budget, and on page 18 of 93 of the budget, there's a contingency line. It's $78,000. $50,000 is contingency, which we keep every year in case for unexpected expense, and the other $28,000 is for the museum. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain how we got to where we are, and we will now open the meeting for public comment. So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public comment.
And also,
Not just the museum, anything pertaining to the budget is open for discussion. When you come to the mic, just state your name. Come. Just state your name for the record, please.
Doris Tomaselli. I actually just had a question. I'm very much supporting the museum, but I must have missed what you were saying. So are you not saying you are cutting the budget at all for the museum? Or
The museum,
Yeah.
the town put $40,000
Right.
in the budget.
Right. Is that for this year, or are you cutting it down to 12? Because
No,
that's what I heard.
It's in two lines. We put
Okay.
$12,000. We came up with a way for them to, one, help, generate more interest in the building, do fundraising and things of that nature. We would match it dollar for dollar. So the $12,000, the second $28,000 was gonna be dollar for dollar. We're open to suggestions. I mean, the public's gonna have suggestions, but the board, we think that board should try to work with this town board to make this happen. I think my presentation tonight shows there's a lot of things that could happen.
Yeah.
But we don't have to change the budget. Our budget includes, I forgot the dollar amount of the entire budget, but there's $40,000 in that budget earmarked for the museum. How they get it is to be determined by the board when they discuss it with the town board.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I just truly support the museum. I like the spaces it's in. I've been in the studio around the corner. It is a very small space, but if you're saying that there is going to be additional stuff, then I appreciate
The
that too.
square
But I
footage
think,
throughout the building, third floor, second floor, first floor, all has the same amount of space. The only thing that's lost in the basement level, the bottom level, is that one petition wall, which is a bearing wall.
And
Okay.
I think they would have more square footage with the building in the back than they currently have.
all right. Now, and I'm also concerned too that people are complaining to you about the museum, and we've not heard that anyone's actually approached the museum about the hours being open. And I know they have a very small staff, and that sometimes they intend to be there and the car doesn't function or somebody's sick and there is nobody to replace them. So I don't want them to be faulted for that either.
Well-
And I also know too that they also do so many hours above and beyond those hours. They offer so many other programs that are for children and for adults that we just really think is fabulous, and I just don't want them to be sold short.
And this board does too. The only thing is, if you're not gonna be somewhere and people are expecting to be there,
Right.
all you gotta do is post a sign. But if it
Well,
happens-
that's true, but if you can't get there to post a
Well,
sign,
then
so
they
I don't know
should-
how
they-
often that's occurred, because it sounds like you've gotten quite a few of them,
No,
but
I
it
say
might be
quite a few. We
3.
get probably a dozen a year.
And,
You may
you know,
not think it's a lot, but again, if someone's
Yeah.
coming, I had one person, they happened to be here for 2 days. They called me and said no one was there. They called me
Yeah.
and said, when is it? I can't answer the question. See, we get
Right.
the calls. I don't know if the board gets a call. I don't know if there's a phone number to call them.
Yeah.
They go across to the library, ask them, when's it gonna be open? I mean, look, if a person's not gonna be there, they call in. And believe me, if
Right.
they call the town, we're down at 1 Main Street, they call us, we will go down and put a sign up there too. I'm just
Yeah.
explaining why we're doing what we're doing.
All right, and I know too that also if so many people are on their cell phones, that if they email them, Amy is very responsive whether the museum is open or not. And so I think that, you know, in this age too, that just making a phone call too sells the museum short when there could be an explanation for that, or they could get there to help somebody. Or Amy might be there working in the back and doesn't know, and you can't always leave the door open when you can't
No, but
monitor
there's been
who's going in
signs
there.
up, you
So-
know, call such and
Okay.
such a number, and
All right.
unfortunately, people have called it not. But again, this is, there's two things: accountability, which is something that can be worked on pretty well.
Right.
The sign change with the hours, you know, maybe discussion of hours.
Yeah.
Maybe it's open too many days. Now they can make, you know, they can have arrangements where they can have people make appointments to go and see if there's like a Boy Scout troop or a school group wants to go. They can still be open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Maybe make it Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Some people mention Sunday, but you know, Sunday's a kind of a tough day to get anybody to work. But there's a lot of things to be done. And look at, over the years, I've been here now, this is my 8th year. We've really never had a problem. The only time we've had one now is with how we're gonna fund this here now, and it's not really a problem. It's something that should be worked out. Again, what is a better use of this building? And of course, upstairs, is it gonna be a theater, a cultural arts?
Right.
I pointed out, I don't even think I even mentioned, between the second and third floor, there's an area as well that they would need to change. The sad thing is, we don't know how long it's gonna take for this to happen.
Right.
You know, if I could say, when I first started speaking to them, it was only gonna take 6 months to do something, you could do it. Now, they tried to say to us, well, you know, we're going out to RFP, I think by the end of next week, or within 2 weeks, we'll out to RFP. And once we get the bids in, they will determine when they do this. You know, we can't, you know, close a portion for, you know, a week or 2 weeks or I mean, it takes time. The last one took, I don't know, like, was it 9 months?
Yeah.
It took 9 months.
Right. I remember going
It-
to events that the museum was trying to hold when their space was closed, and they still were very valiant about trying to keep things open and trying to have
And
events.
unfortunately, we learned a valuable experience with that, which is
Yes.
what we're trying to prevent now. If there's lead dust circulating in that building, we don't want that to be happening, so we have to what? Now, the thing is, on the third floor, the bottom floor, the bottom floor, didn't experience the dust and everything that the second floor did. And don't
Right.
forget, as people walk around, this building's 100 and something, 120 years
it's-
old.
it's an
okay?
icon, yeah.
And as you're walking around upstairs, the dust is just gonna fall. It's like walking
Right.
around an old barn. You can't ignore it, and it's gonna happen. And of course, if the space is empty temporarily, whatever, but if they move back, I mean, again, their lease ends in 4 years. Everyone's gonna be here. Oh, you can't not, you know, give them back their space again.
Right.
But is it best utilized? It's something we have to do. And again, as far as money, the money's in the budget and can be allocated accordingly.
Right, that's what my major concern was. Well, thank you. I do support the museum. Right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Donna Relier. Let me just, maybe I missed it. Where's Studio Around the Corner going to go if the library, the
Again,
museum
well,
moves?
Studio around the corner has had experience with whatever. They planned to, they would go to the second floor. Even
During the
renovation.
construction?
When most of it's done, they will start to renovate that floor and take precautions as they move forward with any construction upstairs. We have no idea how long it's gonna take. But they're willing to go up there and, you know, work with whatever the problem may be.
Okay. Now, I'm still not clear about this $28,000, that you're going to hold that aside?
There's all the money's held aside, okay? There's,
Well, you mean all the money is there?
all the money is in the budget.
Right,
now,
but,
this is a budget discussion. Right now, as part of it, this town board does not have to make an adjustment to the budget lines for the museum. There's $40,000. We want the board to come to the table and see if we can work something out to get this the way the future that I hope everybody sees for the town, and not just one floor, but all the floors, and they can work accordingly. It should be a cultural arts building, and having the museum where it has been for a long, long time, but sometimes things change. As this moves forward, the cultural arts, the museum, if we're here, the cultural arts studio around the corner here, and the theater up there, it's two entities that should be kind of together, which is kind of like what we're offering with them with the storage. They're on the same level. It just makes better flow, I think, of the building.
but my question is, you said something about the board would decide whether to disperse that money or not, and
The board, well,
you.
the money, $12,000, we're going to send out the payments quarterly, okay? If the museum board comes here and tries to work with us, now if they don't, it's.
Then you're not going to give them the rest of the money? Is that's my,
Well, they can have the rest of the money, but they have to work for it, but we can change that.
work for it how?
Well,
So the way, there's 40,000 in the budget, and they would get 12,000, and the way it's set up right now is they would match dollar for dollar. Every dollar they raise, it matches up to 28,000 to get to the 40,000. I think what Supervisor Hay is saying, that the 40,000's in there in the total budget, so we don't have to change the budget amount. And how we disperse the funds, whether it's matching or in totality without matching, is still up for discussion.
I see.
The board would vote on this. I mean, it can be pulled out and discussed, and then the board would have a say on how this is going to be funded.
I think what we want to point out is we don't need to change the dollar amount of the budget because the 40,000 is allocated in there. It's just how it is dispersed.
Well, I guess my concern is, I don't, when you have a staff of one person running the museum, how are they going to fundraise $28,000 to match what you have in the budget?
And I think it's open for discussion.
it may not have to happen. We have to get the museum board, I believe, to the table to discuss this.
All right, well, let me just say, as a resident, to me, $40,000, how many people do we have in this town? 20,000 maybe?
18 and change.
18 and change, that's like $2 a person. So if you have a family of 4, that's under $10 a year in your taxes, which is nothing. So I don't understand why you can't just fund it without these contingencies.
Well, but look at, this building, what's the future of this building? Does the museum dictate how this building is to be used in the future? Do you support other?
No, I'm not saying they should dictate anything.
Well, but-
My point is, I would like to see us have a museum. I think we should.
We do, and we will.
And whether it stays where it is or goes downstairs is not my point. My point is, I think it should still be funded by the town without all these contingencies and about whether they have to fundraise or... And my point is that in a town of this size, that's under $10 a year in taxes per family. That's 2 Starbucks.
I don't think,
The school said the same thing to us, but look, we get your point, we understand it.
I would like,
This can change.
Well, I'm hoping it does, because I think the town should fund it. I think we don't have much else around here.
I don't think it's about the money.
Well,
you-
I do.
No, okay. I mean, we put the full amount in the budget. It's not like we're trying to save money here. It's about the bigger picture of
No,
what's
but-
the best use
but
for the building.
It's up to you guys whether you give it to them or not.
Absolutely.
And as a taxpayer, I'm saying, put it in there as a line item to be given for the salaries and the expenses of the museum. That's all.
Donna, if I may, I did do some research. For example, in Phillipstown, they give their museum, I think it's $13,600 a year, $40,000. And the board has acknowledged this in working with us, which was very nice in some letters we got, that it is a very generous amount. And I'm not opposed to giving them that amount, but it is above what most towns give their historic societies or museums, just to put it in some perspective.
Okay, but,
And the town board has been doing it for decades, and we don't plan to change that.
all right, I'm just saying, as a resident, I think we should have things around here. I think it's important for our children to learn the history of our area.
And that's how.
And nobody else around here has a museum, do they?
No, Phillipstown.
Yeah, Phillipstown.
Well,
They give
that's
them-
pretty far away from here.
And the other thing that I know, I'm on the CAP board, and we fundraise every year because it's really important for us too, for what our mission is. And I think, and it's different because it's county-wide, but it's often the boards that, it wouldn't be up to the director at all necessarily, just as a point of order. It was not necessarily up to the director. That's really not, his or her job is not to fundraise.
Right, well,
Just-
that's kind of my point, like, you're going to make,
No, it would be up to the board to do the fundraising.
Well, I
I'm
don't-
saying, on most boards I've been on, when you have to fundraise, it's up to the board to fundraise. That's
right.
all.
Okay, well,
One good thing about tonight's meeting, there's 11 members allowed onto the board, okay? Currently, probably, there's resignations on that board. There are people that live outside of the town that are on that board. There's a lot of people here that can sit on that board. I think the best thing to do is anyone that's not outside of town, and we have people that lived here for many years that are outside of town, make them emeritus to the board, and have an active board here to work with the town. Again, we've never had this issue before, but now we want to move forward that building. How do we move forward? Does the museum stay where it is, or can we ask it to relocate to a better space? And in 4 years, what do we do? I mean, you're going to be back here 4 years saying, move it, status quo, we let it stay. And we're going to, so we won't get the change. We have to think, what's the best use of this building? The
well,
museum?
I get that, I'm not arguing over
but-
where it should go, my question is
Well,
how
I
it's to
think
be
I would-
financed.
I would consider changing the way that we allocate the money to the museum if they would consider moving their space.
That's fair.
Well, that's what we're
All right, I have one last question. That other building off to the side that you said you were going to give them space?
Yes,
I thought the town had records and things in there.
we are. We're willing to go way out of our way to help the museum.
Where would you put all of that?
Well, that's what I'm going to be telling the board in 2 weeks.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
suggesting-
Because I know
They're gonna
you
tell
took
me-
that back a few years ago from the library, so I just assumed that was...
No, it has been used for records.
And all the
Full of-
other
yeah.
records downstairs right now in studio around the corner, they don't get all that space. Someone said it was a small space, because we have probably 2/3 of the space down there for our records. I'm gonna make a proposal to the town board to change that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm James Nixon, president of the Southeast Museum. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and council people. A number of things I guess I have to touch on. One, I'd like to clarify about addressing Mr. Hayes' question of how we got to this point where we are. And if you're thinking it's sort of a sad state, I agree with you. I've known some of you for many years, and we've always gotten along well. And not that we're not getting along now, it's just that we're not communicating well, is how I feel it is. As far back as, I believe it was April, I, as the president of the museum, sent a letter to this board that was collaborated on by all of our trustees, discussing the issues of the fact that we were closed in 2018 because of the lead dust issue that you touched on earlier, and anticipating that there will be more construction in the future, continuing or at least intermittent construction, and proposing that we have set up a more formal program of communication between the museum board, this board, the Cultural Arts Council, and Coalition, and basically anyone else who was involved, I guess. At that time, we were asking for a meeting with this board. This is the meeting we've been asking for every so often for the last few months. Okay, and now we're finally having it. We, meaning we, the trustees of the museum and the town board. We have been wanting to talk to you about all of these issues, not necessarily balled up now with budget concerns. But here it is. It's a public meeting. Anybody can come, and the budget is an issue. The museum board is more than willing to try to work with the town board or any other town representatives in terms of how to proceed with design, reconstruction, and management of that renovation work in the old town hall. Just as an aside, the rendering that you had in the opening presentation has my name on it. because I was working for the town of Southeast about 20 years ago for plans to renovate this building. And for whatever reason, it didn't quite go through. I'm more than happy with the current plans as they are proceeding, and as far as I can tell, their architect is doing a very good job. So I would applaud they continue that. I would also like to mention at this time that I am very impressed with the job that the studio around the corner has done with their space in the lowest level, whether we call it a basement or not. But that space is not as conducive for the way our museum operates and for the displays that we have. The issue about the ceiling height is not specifically those signs that are hanging or high on the walls, but some of the furniture is that not as tall as 12 feet, but it's as tall as 8 feet, or a little over 8 feet with a base. And so those things are difficulties. But I think perhaps more importantly, we never had a discussion about would this work to move the museum to the basement, to move the studio around the corner to the museum level, which frankly I don't think works, because if there's lead dust, there's lead dust. I don't feel necessarily that the artists downstairs are less susceptible to damage from lead dust. In one of our letters, we had given this some thought and suggested that we are willing to work with you, your construction manager, whomever, to work out the logistics of what's the timing and schedule of how this work will be done. Incidentally, maybe not everybody knows that rendering has my name on it because in real life I'm an architect. And it's not so difficult to envision putting out an RFP to have work done and setting parameters for when and how the contractors can work around inhabitants of the building. And maybe inhabitants of the building leave the building for a period of time, for a 3 or 4 month period or something like that. Generally speaking, when school districts have significant work done on their school buildings, it happens in the summer. Because the kids aren't there, that's the easiest and safest time to do the work. And everybody knows that going in, that's a factor. So when someone bids on the windows or whatever the next phase is going to be, that is just something to make them aware of. As the building is occupied, partially occupied, and we can work out a schedule around that. So about the money, which until this presentation, I was telling people that the money is not connected to the issue of moving. Maybe I was wrong.
Well, it's 50, I wouldn't say 50-50, but it's a concern. We have to look to the future of the building.
Right. And that's understandable, that you have a concern about the future of the building. It's your building, and you should. But the money, $40,000 is allocated. $40,000 is what you have generously given us for a number of years. At one time, it was something more even. And we appreciate that. We appreciate that we rent that space. Rent that space for $1 a year.
Well, we never got $1, but I'm not looking for it either.
Because I have one, but I wouldn't do that on camera. We appreciate all that the town has done to support the museum. As you said, for many, many years now, we have had a good relationship. And I hope not to let that slip away. But, okay, it still sounds vague. The letter that we had received explaining the $12,000 versus the remaining $28,000 suggested that was some sort of sliding scale of a dollar for dollar match versus a 50-cent per dollar match or whatever. But it was not a clear and concise formula. Your general concept of wanting to incentivize us or any other not-for-profit or anybody else, I understand to some extent. But the practical difficulty here is that just as this board is working on a budget now, my board will be working on a budget in the next month for going into 2020. And so the numbers we rely on in going to a budget and scheduling programs and figuring out what we're going to spend on this, that, and the other thing are unreasonably verifiable or anticipated numbers. And so, right now, it's $12,000 is what we would put in the budget, coming from the town. And we have other monies planned from coming from other places, and there are things we're waiting to hear confirmation from. So, that is my greatest concern now about the money. And the building, I'm willing to come here or anywhere and talk to you about it every day until we have a resolution, if we have to. But at this point, the plan for the money, which still seems vague, is too vague for us to rely on. It makes it difficult to plan. It's going to make it difficult. Well, it's going to change the way we will apply for grants as coming into the future, because we always include our budget. Every granting agency, needs to see that, and understandably. If it means a meeting between the town board and the museum board specifically dedicated to that, we're open to that. I'm open to meeting with anybody who wants to meet in good faith.
Okay, I'll speak for myself as the chief budget officer, and my board can chime in. If what you just said is true, and you will work with us, make the attempt to work with us, I would be willing to tell you the 40,000, but the future of the building has to be concerned for all cultural arts programs. Again, 4 years from now, you won't have a lease. And you're gonna be
Correct.
back here, and people will be out there saying, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. But, things change. Maybe there's another building, who knows? We don't know. There's, proposals out there to do something, we don't know. So I would be willing to say, so you can do your budget for this year, as long, the dialogue, we kind of started, we were kind of rushed, we had to put a budget together, but I would do that. So if I just take a quick, first of all, James, the money's in there,
I understand.
okay? So we don't have to change $1 figure.
Right.
So if you're willing to make the commitment, would you submit it here to the town? I'd be willing to do that.
I look at it as a great opportunity to really work with the museum. I think our overall goal, I have no problem funding the museum fully for this year, but I'd really like to sit down and figure out what's going to work best for the taxpayers and residents of Southeast to really make this building a success. And I think we will get, I think working with the museum, we can, and of course the coalition, we can get more grants, and we can really make this into a space that helps revitalize Main Street as well. So I would be actually excited about refunding and meeting with you and really working on this.
And James, your very last letter to me, which I didn't bring in here with me, I'd go get it if I have to, you said the board will get back to you.
Again? Okay, I
Your-
guess
your
that's always
comment-
what I
your-
say.
Your comment in that letter was, the board will get back to you, but
Okay.
we didn't hear. So,
Oh, I'm
this is a
sorry.
good,
Well, now I'm getting back to you.
Okay.
I apologize.
so we're telling you for this year and over the next months, couple months, the renovation has to take place. How you go about doing that, again, once the RFP goes out. I know you want it done during the winter time when you're closed from December or whatever, but sometimes that does not work in the type of schedule and the type of work has to be done. You're an architect, I'm not. Whoever does the bidding will do it accordingly. They'd be made aware that the building is not available from certain times, but if it coincides or doesn't coincide accordingly, we're stuck with their schedule, not ours. Deal?
I'm prepared to try to work with anybody who's willing to try to work with me.
Well, I think we've worked well for many, many years, but now we hit this little glitch. So I'm gonna take what you said here in front of the public to the bank, literally, and we'll make that commitment. The money, we don't have to change the money in the thing, and we're telling the public right now.
Let's
I
get
didn't
a
hear-
sense of the
I didn't hear
board.
from all the other
Yeah.
board
Make
members.
a proposal. You're saying the 40,000, they're gonna get the whole $40,000?
This, why we work toward a solution to the problems we're
Yeah.
encountering.
I think for me, you said we tied the money to the approval, but this is bigger than the museum. I love the museum. I think it's great. The museum's only open 6 months a year. Schools are open 9. It's about the building. We're the landlords of the building. What's the best use of the building? How can that building really jumpstart a village revitalization? How can that bring a lot more culture to the village? The village is the heart of this community. I personally want to do anything we possibly can to that building to make it successful. I think you guys moving downstairs will allow you to be open 12 months a year instead of 6 since there's heat. And I think that's better value for the money for all the taxpayers. I think there's better lighting. I think it's more conducive to a museum. So I just want that to be, on the record that that's my consideration for this. It's bigger than the museum. I don't want to discount the museum at all. I think it's great. I want to keep it. But how can we utilize that building? How can that building be more successful so the museum could be more successful? So those are just my comments.
So James, what do you think? Edwin?
No, I definitely support the museum. I do take exception that you say, I do recall the letter in April, but since then, there has been no communication to reach out to me or to, in my opinion, to any other board member. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. Like I said, I would have gladly met with you in May or June, but I have not personally received an email or anything stating, let's talk about this. So I just kind of wanted to clarify that a little bit. I just feel that, people think now, oh, we've been ignoring you for 6 months, and that's not the case.
Well, it could be something that only went to the supervisor. and didn't
Okay,
go through.
all
I don't know.
right. So I just wanted a
Well,
little point of clarification.
meetings. We did have the two just recently. Look at, let's not regress.
Yeah,
Yes.
Move forward.
but
We're
definitely want to
taking you at
support the
your word. You're
museum.
gonna, make this attempt. And, I mean, I know you're opposed to it. We're in favor of it. And somewhere along the line, but in 4 years, it is, we have to work this out now.
Right.
So for this year, John?
And this year is 2020, just to make the clarification.
Yeah, the next
So
budget cycle.
you
John?
won't have to be,
Yeah, I would support fully funding the museum with the understanding that we're all going to be working together. And I hope that you and the people that have responded to this call to action will bring the same energy to thinking about revitalizing that whole space. Maybe if you all took a walk down to studio around the corner and participate in their activities and see that space, you would, and also work with the people at studio around the corner to find out how they may be able to bring some ideas to you about making the museum a little bit more user-friendly. They get great traffic, but anyway, it's been really illuminating getting all the emails and letters and postcards from residents and other supporters of the museum over the last 2-3 weeks, and you can bring that same energy to fundraising or assisting the museum board and making it a even more vital and important organization. But thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, James, you got a deal?
Just a second.
Or maybe not.
No, I'm not going to keep going on and on, but how many of you are here for the museum? Okay, thank you. To be honest, until the...
Here for the museum, how do you not arrive for the...
Yes, you arrived for the museum, thank you. No, I just want to go back to Mr. Lord's comment that, to be honest, we generated more energy than I would have anticipated, which I think is good for the community.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You don't make these things any shorter, do you?
You can pull down the mic. I always have to.
I was gonna pull down the whole, okay. Good evening. My name is Hope Blumenthal, and I'm speaking for the O'Brien Blumenthal family of Southeast. We moved to Southeast in 1994. I knew very little about the area, except I had worked in a Girl Scout camp off of Bullet Hole Road in the late 1960s. Unfortunately, that camp is gone. It's lost to history. And that's one of the reasons why we were excited to find out that Southeast had a museum dedicated to preserving local history. Driving around Southeast, one sees street names for founding families of Southeast. These families have helped keep the history of Southeast alive by donating photographs, items, and oral history to the museum. The demographics of the area has changed, which is an even greater reason to share Southeast history with newcomers. If any of you have or had children in CV Star, then you know of the Colonial Day and the encampment programs. These programs give our children a feeling of what life was like in Southeast. I have been at CV Star when Amy came in and shared museum artifacts with students. All the technology in the world cannot replace that experience. And speaking of Amy, it is amazing all she gets accomplished with her small budget. Originally, I was going to talk about your cutting the funding by 70%, but now you've guaranteed the $40,000. I'm happy. On a personal note, and I have a little photograph to show you, in June 2004, my mother-in-law came to visit. We took her to a program at the museum, and so here's the photo, and there's a haiku in the back that she wrote.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay. We took her to a program at the museum that was teaching how to write haiku and paint with watercolor. Our son didn't say, let's take Grandma to an impersonal mall because that's where I live. He didn't say, let's take Grandma to the movies because that's where I live. He said, let's take Grandma to the Southeast Museum because that's where I live. Members of the town board, Southeast is where you live. If you, and I'm paraphrasing George Santayana, want to be remembered for posterity, you must look back at your ancestors. The Southeast Museum is the only place in our community that is the guardian of our history. Please don't tamper with their funding. Thank you.
No, I know, but do you want to give me a copy of your letter?
But if we take out the funding, we've got to tell you this.
Okay, I'm not taking it.
On the 2020 budget. See no, Mike, please.
Good evening. My name is Christine Piccini. I am the Deputy Mayor of the Village of Brewster, and in that capacity, I want to mention that in our efforts to revitalize, we do take great pride in and acknowledge the value of the library, the museum, the studio around the corner, and the efforts to rejuvenate the museum, the theater space on the third floor of that building, the old town hall. But that's not what my question was. That was just for your edification and delight. My question is, do I understand now that what you are going to do is amend your budget so that the funds will be firmly captioned in the line that funds the museum, or are you still going to tuck them into the contingency line? And if you're going to tuck them into the contingency line, can you explain to me how your contingency line works? Because in the village, we have a contingency line that is there for contingencies. The other things that we want to have in our budget, we fund and put them on specific lines, and then they are, in fact, earmarked, although they're more than earmarked, they're committed to that item. In the contingency line, then there is flexibility on what we do with the funds if something occurs and we need to use them for additional snow removal that because the weather was more than we had anticipated. It might be even in those contingencies. We might have to address it there. But if it's...
Okay, let me answer your question.
You can answer that one, but there's a part two to the question then also. If you go back to or think about or revisit the matching funds for the monies that were addressed earlier as part of contingency, if the fundraising efforts exceeded the $28,000 that was, your word, earmarked for the museum inside the contingency line, would you match those additionally?
At the time, no.
That
It
was,
was going to be $40,000, which is what the town's commitment's been for many years. And like I said earlier,
Yeah.
it's $750,000 over the past 19 years.
yeah, I know all that. I just wanted to understand the mechanics.
And as far as the other, I think we're all very trustworthy people, maybe because we're politicians or not, and that would have to include yourself, unfortunately, but.
No, I'm not a politician, I'm a public servant, and I fight the word.
I am,
I fight the word. But I can do that. Our budget allows me $4,000 a year and innumerable hours of work.
Similarly, okay, we can say what we want, I think we're all, and I put a tremendous amount of time and effort into this town. I was a 19-year legislator, and I really worked my butt off, okay?
I'm not contesting that, I'm
So all
asking
I'm
about
saying,
the
just
funds.
To make you happy, the budget, again, we'll put the 40 in the line, but you take our word, James made a commitment, this town board made a commitment, but it will make you happy and you don't trust us, we'll put it there.
You're going to put the $40,000 back in the
We'll put it in the
library,
line.
in the line
But-
for the
And they
museum.
just have to live up to their commitment. This
Well,
town will.
I'm talking dollars only, I'm talking numbers, which is my thing. I'm talking about the budget, that's
So,
all I'm
okay, the
talking
budget-
about.
The money was there regardless how it is. We made a commitment here tonight on film, and we would do it. And as far as contingency, when I was in the legislature for 19 years, we had, I don't say numerous contingency lines, but a lot of departments had contingency lines. I put $50,000 in a contingency. It's almost half the amount of money that was in the budget total when I got here. The $50,000 is for any unexpected expense. Now,
That's- yeah.
We just tore down the block building, okay? Now, I don't want to surprise my board, but I'm going to come forward with a proposal how to put it back up or to do something.
Correct,
That $50,000 and more will be used for that purpose.
exactly, that's a
But if
contingency,
it's not- But
absolutely.
if it's not that, it could be something else.
Correct.
It's not just there for willy-nilly. It's for some
Exactly.
unexpected expense.
Exactly, unexpected
That's
expense,
what I
not
was-
part of a museum budget. That
That's
was
what I
my
did.
concern.
Okay.
And you've addressed it, you said you're going to move it back to the line
Yes.
for the museum. Thank
So
you.
that would reduce the contingency from 78, which was
You can do-
28.
I mean, you can do
Oh, no,
whatever
but
you
I'm
want with
just
the
talking, you're a woman
contingency,
from
yeah.
numbers, so I'm just trying to explain.
Continue to go from 78 back to 50.
Uh,
He said it wrong.
That's
I don't want
what
to
you
commit, he got the numbers wrong.
No, it's going from 78 to 50, which 28,
50 for us.
right, 28
Correct,
was.
correct, but it makes no
covering the 40.
impact on what you're
No,
doing with it
no.
because you just said
It
it
was
was
al-
all,
it was always-
it guarantees that it's for the museum. Yes,
It was
thank
always-
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything on the 2020 budget? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Shea. I am on the board of the museum, and I'm happy to be here. And I'm happy to see the museum has a wonderful support before me. And furthermore, I want to thank Supervisor Hay for the wonderful tour he took us through of the building. I had no idea that the space was the same in size. However, after being at Studio Around the Corner many, many times and knowing the museum space, I can honestly tell you it won't work. The studio around the corner, if I was exhibiting art only, that would be fine. But the museum's purpose is to exhibit artifacts and not just art. So it's apples and oranges insofar as supporting a space for a museum. Now, the museum has been there for a number of years. And I don't know if you can recall, but this whole show here was in Studio Around the Corner. And now they're here. That's fine with me. But in my presence in the town of Southeast for the last 30 years, I don't live there anymore, but as Councilwoman Eckhart will tell you, I've contributed an awful lot raising money for many things, from the library to the Historical Society, whatever. So I know a lot about the town. What annoys me is I know the consequences that we've had in the last few years insofar as the influx of people coming into the town, people waiting for work on the corners, etc., that turned people off. However, after the 2008 recession, that has lessened and gone off. Right now, the town is in a position to really be a jewel for the county. And when I say jewel, I look at that town's Main Street, and I look at the churches and everything else, and that town hall building, and I say, Bedford doesn't have that. Katona doesn't have that. They don't have a station like that. Now, my feeling is, it's going to get better. However, what bothers me is, the museum has been there many years, going through all these trials and tribulations that the town of Brewster has gone, which I believe, in my mind, is the center of Southeast compared to the other towns. And furthermore, when all this was happening, the library and the museum were the only anchor in that town expressing something for people to see. And right now, I feel you don't care.
No, that's not true, but...
Now, my original point is, the apples and oranges which stood around the corner, it is not a place for the museum. It just won't work. It's, the museum was just exhibiting paintings on the wall, fine. But that's not what the museum does. So that's out of the question. The other thing is, in my mind, that $40,000 and you meeting 28 that the museum has to raise, to me is extortion. Because you want the museum to prove that it's a popular place for the public. So what do? You do that. Now, why is all this happening? The things that you don't bring up are the hardships the museum has had. Being in a building that the town board and the town of Southeast won't heat months out of the year. Secondly, the lead dust problem. Now, you have the building, you own the building, and you permitted those changes upstairs. Unfortunately, nobody was that much on top of it to realize that that dust would filter down into the museum, which is a public institution. The museum asked the town board to do something about it, the town of Southeast, and you sent a contractor in there who did not the right thing. I don't know if he was certified or whatever. He did as much as he could, but it wasn't enough. The museum then said, listen, the downstairs is not ready yet. It still has dust. Whoever did this and is not coming back, what do? Well, you didn't do anything. So the museum spent $16,800 of its own money to get a qualified person in there to clean that up. Now, the psychology that I see is that was an embarrassment to the town of Southeast, that the museum had to pay that money to have it cleaned up. Now, I don't know if it's a vendetta, but for me, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, insofar as saying, move the studio around the corner. If you don't, well, we're not getting the $40,000, and you'll have to match that. Match that to prove that the people are interested in the museum, which, as I said, to me, it's sort of extortive. Furthermore, I think at this point, the biggest issue is 4 years from now. What happens with the new lease?
That's what we're discussing.
That's
what we'll be discussing with the board.
Well, will the museum get a lease in 4 years?
We'll have to discuss that, sir. We don't know.
All right.
A lease is a lease. We extended it.
Because that's what's shaky in my mind.
There's no guarantee. The bill may not be there.
Well, that's what's shaky in my mind, no guarantees. All right, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity of talking about all the things that are on my mind, especially after listening to everyone else. Thank you.
Anyone else on the 2020 budget? If you want to speak, just come up to this mic, please. Sir, just come over this way, and then you can get up.
I'm Olena Treskett. I'm a board member of the Town of Southeast Cultural Arts Coalition and been working on the project for the last 9 years. I'm ambivalent about whether the museum stays on the middle level or goes to the basement. I like having them there, and I think it's an important thing to have in the community. I'm not sure I agree that the money that you're funding them is the best use of that money. We were established as a not-for-profit in 2010 to create and sustain cultural arts in our community. After the town residents failed to pass a bond initiative that would have renovated the historical town hall as a fully functioning building that could serve as a cultural arts center and also house a museum. For the past 9 years, we have rented the basement level of the building and transformed it into the studio around the corner, where we host a variety of cultural programs, including concerts, plays, art exhibits, kids events, rehearsals, seminars. We have also been spearheading the restoration of the Old Town Hall, as it has a unique and beautiful theater on the upper level, one that's been closed for many years, on the floor above the museum's present space. CAC receives no budget funding from the town or the county, nor would we expect to. We rely on fundraising, grants, programming fees, membership, and contributions, sponsorships by those in the community who participate and appreciate our mission. I kind of feel like the museum should follow the same model, and maybe the town's resources could be focused on the actual Old Town Hall restoration. Part of me thinks that restoring full funding is almost nonsensical when you consider the constraints in which the museum has to operate. It's too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter, lack of storage space, moldy, dusty, etc. Like a lot of 100-plus-year-old structures, it faces the challenges of an aging infrastructure. And really, restoring the resource, repairing the windows, doing all that stuff will allow the long-closed theater to reopen, and it'll also provide the museum with a space that could operate all year long and better protect its valuable artifacts. So hopefully I won't make enemies here, but I believe it's time for the town to start using those monies on the Old Town Hall restoration and focusing on the building, and maybe assigning a non-elected person on the town payroll to oversee the job. I kind of feel like volunteer efforts alone on this town-owned building are not going to get the job done. And if the town truly wants to progress on it, we need to make the restoration more of a priority. Maybe redirecting this bit of funding could make the difference. And maybe it's time for a new bond initiative. The wonderful groundswell of support for the museum may indicate that the community is really ready to do this. Anyway, in an ideal situation, there would be a good balance, and everybody could be happy. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Alan Gruber. I've lived in the town of Southeast for somewhat over 4 decades. I've been associated with the Southeast Museum. I've helped with several displays, mostly dealing with railroads and other parts of the history. Donated artifacts, lent artifacts, and obviously the museum is so very important. As far as fundraising is concerned, there was a recession in 2008, and from my experience at the Danbury Museum, donations have never come back to what they were. and yet costs of electricity and everything has gone up. And to take a large part of the budget and connect it to fundraising, it's, you don't have that much time and that much resources to be a fundraiser and a curator and a sweeper or a gift shop person. And one thing, when I walked into this fine room, I just took a look at the Great Seal of Southeast, and there's the trains, and there's the farms, and all this great stuff that's happened here. And I think it's important that the museum be properly funded and continue its mission. Now, there's a lot of discussion here about dust. Well, dust is not a problem. It's the toxic stuff in the dust. And I would say probably of those 10 people who said they couldn't get access to the museum, maybe some of those people knew or couldn't get in because of the lead. And there's other stuff too. There's asbestos, there's lead, there's rodent feces, all kinds of stuff. So, so what I'm trying to say is that these people who have complained about the museum, there's a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's parking, sometimes it's no heat, sometimes it's toxic chemicals. I recall one time going to the museum, and on the east wall, there were signs for parking spaces. Parking space only for such and such number on Main Street. Every one of those spaces indicated that. There was nothing about the museum, so there's really no parking spaces. Everybody's talked about the Village of Brewster. Well, that's a problem in itself. I don't know how many plans have been for the revitalization of Brewster. I haven't seen much more than just the patch on the marquee at the Cameo Theater. Millions of dollars. I don't know what happened to that. But I'm not going to continue on that. One of the things that we found at Danbury at the museum, and again, this is as far as protecting the artifacts, is Danbury Museum, which is the old train station, another very historic building, not quite as old as the old. We have installed a plastic film which cuts down very little on the light, but it prevents any kind of ultraviolet, anything that would destroy an artifact, painting or whatever it is. Very inexpensive. So that's a minor issue. Well, I guess that's about enough. Just basically to say that the museum needs the money. It's an important mission. And if the museum should fade away, then I would recommend changing that seal. Maybe, put up something, something stainless steel and glass. I have no complaint with the town board. I mean, they've been very receptive to my problems that I've had, in the neighborhood, and done a good job. Neighborhood watch, the highway cleanup. There's a lot that's being done that's good. But the museum can't be abandoned. Again, Village of Brewster, there's no parking. So how many of those people complained that they couldn't get a parking spot? I mean, especially for people who come from out of town, they had short of time, and where will we park? I noticed on my travels,
Sir, just talk more into the microphone so people can hear you.
My apologies, I'm scared of these things. Scarsdale, very affluent community, nice downtown and everything else. They built a 4-story parking garage right by the train station. There's been talk of a parking garage probably since before I was born, and nothing has happened. Again, I don't think that's a town problem. It's obviously a village problem. The town's done a great job getting parking at Southeast. So there's a lot of reasons why these 10 people called and complained. Again, could be heat, could be toxic material, could be parking. That's something beyond the controls of the people who were dedicated to the museum. And I hope we don't lose it.
I just want to say, I don't want anyone to think that this board is against, well, that I'm against the museum. I think that having a theater there and revitalizing that building is key. It's more important than anything. And, you know, some of the issues that come up tonight, like heat and the dust, you know, the lower level is the solution for that. And it allows the museum to be open 12 months. The point I made earlier about schools, my mom taught at Garden Street forever, and they used to walk down to the museum. The way it is now, the museum's only open 3 months when the schools are open. You know, I think we want the museum to be successful, and by that building being successful, there'll be more of a draw to the museum, and the upstairs levels can be more successful. And I recently toured the building. If you can get with Olena and view the top floor where the theater is connected to that middle floor, and it just from a logistical perspective, it just makes more sense. I think the museum can be more successful in their grant fundraising if they're open year-round, and I think the Cultural Arts Coalition could be more successful in their grant raising, which they've raised $500,000, I believe, or thereabouts, if they have a more conducive space to that. So I don't want anyone to think that we're against the museum or for the museum or for the building. I'm extremely for the village. So, you know, I just want to make sure that's clear.
Just want to add one thing. The town, it has a reputation, and I completely agree with it, that their zoning laws, building laws, and everything are up to a high standard. I'd like to know how these people got to work and not protect against this toxic material. It's nothing brand new. I mean, there's ways to, you know, to seal things off. There's how many times you see a bridge being painted or getting scraped before the painting? You have a cocoon around it with like a negative atmosphere, so nothing goes out of that cocoon except going into this filter. Why do, you know, what recourse does the town have to these people who obviously aren't aware that there's toxic materials? Hey, the building's, you know, over 100 years old. There's going to be lead in it. There's going to be who knows what.
I don't think we had a baseline prior. This was before I was on the board, but I don't think we had a baseline prior, so I don't know what recourse there could have been there. I mean, they could say there was lead dust. I mean, it's a 100-year-old building.
Yeah, but I mean, if somebody's, you know, in business to replace windows or do renovations, and if they are in that business, they have to know that material is right, you know, is in the building. I mean,
yeah,
that's foolish to say that they weren't aware of it. Some people will work in that material; they don't believe it.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
but I would think that's something that the town board should look into. I mean, isn't there any requirements for a contractor to?
Well, there
work with
is,
that?
and that's why we learned from the experience. We hadn't done it before, and that's no excuse. We did have the building department go down and look at the structure after the fact and look.
Yeah.
And there was no way to make a determination where it came from. Now, after I saw the emails going back and forth about the lead dust, I went down there personally, dressed accordingly, and spent 3 hours trying to clean 2 rooms, which were still supposedly with lead dust, and it was way in the back. I'll tell you now, I'm a pretty damn good cleaner, okay? And when I got done, if I dropped a hamburger on that windowsill, I would have eaten
Yes.
it. But I understand after I spent 3 hours cleaning just 2 rooms and really scrubbing, that they made a determination there's still lead dust there. When I went into the room, it was very, very dirty. I have to admit, I think that whatever was there, the dust was there for the past 100 years.
No doubt about it. 100 years ago, people didn't know about the problem. And it's not something that just came up this year.
I mean, even now, with nothing going on, there's displays down there with this, you know, dust starting to accumulate on some of the things. When I leave my home, and I come down here, or, you know, I have a home upstate, and I go up there, and I go like this here, there's dust. It's hopefully not lead contaminated, because I'm not gonna have it tested, because there was no lead or asbestos. but it's just the way things are. It's a 100-and-something-year-old building, like you said earlier, and there's no guarantee it was or was not there, but we will be taking precaution this round, which we didn't have the first time.
Yeah, but I think, it's pretty common sense that lead paint was used over the years.
Oh, right, yes, big time.
Okay,
Especially
well,
before the septic.
let's go home.
Hello, I'm Amy Campanaro, the director of the Southeast Museum. I wasn't going to really speak until you started talking a little bit about the lead dust. Just to let everyone know, I know, Eric, you're new to the board, so just to give everyone the timeline. I've been in that building before that 19 years, so I know dust. I know where the dust accumulates. I know the spider webs. You sweep the windowsill, maybe a week later, you got the same spider webs. That dust was new dust. It started on when the gentleman started cleaning on, sanding upstairs on Easter Monday, which was April 2nd, 2018. When he started on the Cameo movie theater alleyway side, when he started on the Gold Lot side, I went to leave the museum, and I went to push the push bar, and I had dust on my hand, which I never had before in 19 years previously. I went to pick up my mail through the mail slot, which falls on the floor. I had dust on my mail and on my hands, which I'd not had in 19 years. I looked at the dust, and it was a little different shape. I know it sounds silly, but it was a little different texture. It felt different. So I spoke to one of my friends who's in real estate, and she said, well, it might be lead dust. I said, no, it can't be. Why would it be? So I got a 3M test at Home Depot, came up positive for lead. Those spots, which was on the floor and on the push bar, not on where you think there would be lead that's regularly peeling or scraping or anything like that. So this was all new lead dust, which I've emailed Supervisor Hay since April, and we've gone back and forth and spoke about it. And yes, the gentleman that did the window reconstruction, restoration, did come back. He cleaned the window sills and the floor, but not the window jambs and not on top. And yes, when Supervisor Hay came to clean the museum, there was a lot of dust on the windows, maybe 100 years old. No, it was because we were closed. We closed in December, the end of December, and we were supposed to open up in May or June that year, and we didn't because of lead dust. So that dust that you saw was from January 1st, say, all the way through April, all the way through, actually, sorry, a whole year, because you came and cleaned in September 2018. So that was almost a year worth of dust that was added on to the lead dust. So that's why it was very dusty in the museum. And when you cleaned, I'm sorry, but you're not RRP certified, and when you did come to clean, you used I gave you the wipes that you were supposed to use. You didn't have a HEPA filter vacuum, so you used the wipes and you used a sponge. And I know you cleaned out the sponge very well and you poured the water down the toilet, but those tests, we had an outside agency come in and test those windowsills, and they did not come out positive. So I just want to put that on the, they did come, sorry, Tony, they did come out positive. Not all of them, but they did. So I just want to put that on the record. And when I was dealing with you, emailing, you said just make sure I keep a clear record of everything that I do, and I have all those emails that I can send to everyone on the town board, because originally I was just dealing with Tony, and then Councilwoman we were dealing with maybe in September or so later, or August or September of 2018. So that was new lead dust. I know it may sound silly, I know what dust looks like, but when you're in a room in an area for so long, and that dust was, anyone that drove through the Gold Lot could see a big puff of snow, of dust behind the guy that was doing the sanding. Speak to the guys that work for the town that go through that parking lot all the time. It was almost like Pigpen. There was a big poof behind him. On my security camera, I have him using the drop cloth and rolling it up and reusing it the next day, which you're supposed to throw out. So there are things that we saw that were not correct, and we did bring it to the town's attention, and the town did address it, but the windows were already put in. So that dust was not just dust that's on the windowsill. All the experts that we came in and the museum paid for, we paid over $800 in professional testing, $16,800 to clean the museum, because we closed in 2018 because of the safety of the public and the safety of the staff. The museum board spent that money so that way we could be reopened. And maybe people think it's silly, who cares? You're not a child care facility, you're not HUD housing, but they took the public safety of our residents to heart, and that's why we took money out of our savings account to do that. I mean, it wasn't something that we wanted to spend money on, but we hired a proper abatement company that threw that stuff out. So that dust was newer dust that was put there since the sanding, and that's what happens when you sand something. You can have lead paint on something, as long as it's not disturbed, it's fine. You can paint over it and have it encapsulated, but the minute it gets airborne, and that's what was happening, it was being sanded and pulverized, and it was airborne and floating. Now, do we know how it got into the museum? I don't know. Maybe it was on the ramp. When I walked in the ramp, it was on my shoes, it got on the floor. I don't stand on windowsills in the museum, although I'm sure I could fit in them. I don't know how it got in there, but the thing is, it was new dust that was not there. Yes, we do have a baseline. I know Councilwoman was talking about getting a baseline of all 3 floors, and that would be wonderful going forward for any work that's done. Anything, just make sure you get that, and then we know what levels are high or not. At the museum, we're going to get tested every quarter. We're going to make sure everything is tested in the right way, just to see what happened from there to here. Excuse me, from here to there, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something we take very seriously. Thank you.
I just have a question for you, because you probably have a little bit of a different perspective than the board, perhaps, but don't you think, as the director of the museum, it would be beneficial for the museum to be open, have a heated space year-round, so that more programs could be done with the community and with the school?
I think it's great if we be open year-round. However, I do not think the space in the basement works properly or lower level. And it's not the sign that Tony put, the Brewster Stand sign. It's not the canoe. It's our 8-foot switch stand, railroad switch stand. It's the board and desk that's 8 feet tall without being on the platform. Most of our artifacts are big and bulky.
But I think those ceilings are taller than 8 feet.
The ceiling, if you went downstairs, the ceilings downstairs are 8 feet, and then you have piping that goes all along it. So there's not a true from floor to ceiling. There are pipes that go below it that you cannot, our display cases that we have, our board and milk, all that are 8 feet tall. They are 8 feet.
Maybe that's something we could work with the board to see what could fit, and really look at it thoroughly. Maybe it doesn't work, but maybe it does.
I mean, I know that the museum board did send the town board a letter explaining all these things of why they did not think it was a proper fit. So we can, I mean, I'm willing, and James, we're all willing to sit down and talk to everybody and work through this. But to think that downstairs is automatically the answer, it's not. And then what happens to Studio Around the Corner? There and that floor, they don't have heat for that year. They could be exposed to lead. Their public who comes in could be exposed to possibly not.
Recommend them doing a baseline, and if they were going to do the construction, they would be doing the construction. And they have a lot more money. They've raised a lot of money. So
Well, may I ask how much money they've raised, if we're comparing us as budgets?
I think in grants, at least $500,000.
In grants?
I think it's more like 3 to 350.
No, it's I
It's
think
450.
In grants?
Yeah,
I
I
believe
think there was
so.
Greg Ball's grant of.
Well, that's, wait, the Greg Balls grant went to the town, and that's line item. It's not a private organization raising the money. That money was administered through the town.
Right, as well, this money, the Harcum
Yeah,
grant.
so that's not money that a nonprofit raised through grants. That's line item money that they got, which is great that the town got it, but that's not through a nonprofit.
Right, but it was working with them that the town
Well,
was
the
able
town could work with us to renovate our current space.
Yes.
We would love to.
I will say that Studio Around the Corner did put in heat and AC, so.
Well, downstairs already had heat and AC.
Right, but the heat had broken down quite a bit. It's not heated by, I believe they pay for that now.
They do. It's the blowers that were always there, the heating blowers. But they came into that space with those accommodations.
Right.
We came into our space with heat as well.
Right, but that.
We've been in our
cost, I
space for
believe it
42
cost-
years and in the building for 56.
Right, and the heating, when Tony took office for that building, was $30,000 a year.
Oh, I know, it's a circular system. Why heat upstairs, all the way upstairs in the theater space? I'm not saying that. I don't think we complained about not having heat at all, and I don't think us having heat and being open year-round was ever a concern of the town that I know of. We've never been there now 20 years. No one's ever told me that was something the town would like us to see.
No, I think Eric was asking if that was.
No, but I'm just saying, in general, that was not something that we thought the town was thinking that we should be open year-round.
It's just like, when you think of the value that it adds, being open year-round adds more value.
Well, exactly, but going back to Studio Around the Corner, if we flip-flop space, they can deal, I guess, with the construction and possible issues that they have with the construction. But isn't that floor going to be renovated and have heat and air conditioning eventually? So why would not the museum stay in our current space that fits our exhibits better if the same thing's going to happen? We've been 42 years in this space with dealing with our issues, and for the last 8-9 years without heat. So what's why switch?
I had assumed after talking to James that these were things that we were going to work on.
Well, I think, and I'm not saying they're not. This is my personal opinion of being in a space and working in a place for 20 years. This is me, Amy, as person that comes to work every day. This is not me, Amy, as director of the museum, but I'm just saying, logically, if you're going to ask other people to switch spaces, then you're asking a lot of them. I mean, their space is very conducive for music and for a gallery. And I'm sure if they come in, if we switch spaces, they probably do wonderful things in the current space. But I'm just saying, if that is on the, going to be renovated, then why wouldn't it be renovated if the museum is there? It seems like the whole building would have better heat and air conditioning overall, as
Oh, it
better
will.
electrical and everything like that. That's just my own personal, I'm not saying that my museum board, it's their decision of what they're going to work with the town. This is my own opinion.
So would you, so in expressing your opinion, do you think it makes sense for the board and the town to work together to
Of
try?
course, that's what type of question's that. Of course.
Well, no.
Of course, we've been working together for how many years? I mean,
know.
every single supervisor and every single town board that I've worked with, and everybody else, that's what, I feel we're the easiest people to work with. We're always accommodating. Anything that anyone wants, we're here. We work well with the town, different departments, getting historical information for them. That's what we are. We're a resource. We're a service organization, and we're a resource. I wouldn't think that we're not.
I agree with you. I think you do a great job with the museum. I don't think anybody's...
Oh, not me, it's the museum itself. We've had different museum board over 56 years. It's always like your board changes, our board changes. And unfortunately, as James said, there seems to be a lack of communication or breakdown in communication lately, which hopefully we can resolve.
You don't sound like you want to resolve it.
Why not?
No.
I want to resolve the,
you
this is
sound
me,
like-
I want to resolve the communication, but I just want to put everything in set of what the museum went through, and then how we had, now we're ready, we're so excited, we did a townwide newsletter to get everything out and going, we got people coming in, we have successful programs, we do more programs now than I've ever done in all the years I've worked here. We have 2 monthly programs, 3 actually starting on Friday. We have open mic for writers and poets, Fridays, the last Friday of the month, last Friday of the month. So we do a lot of monthly I want to work with everybody, but I just want it to be set that this is what the museum has gone through. This is what we've done, and we want to work with everybody. I don't think that we don't want to. We're not a contentious people. I don't find that. I find that.
You sound somewhat contentious.
Well, I'm sorry if I do. I don't mean to.
I don't think you're sorry that you do,
What?
but you do.
Well, then I apologize if I sound contentious. It's not my intention. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to sit down now.
I'm Joan Bradley, and I'm a trustee of the museum. I was a trustee in the 80s into the 90s. I left for a while, and I'm back on board. When I moved to this community over 40 years ago, I was so impressed that a town of this size had such a credible historical museum, not just artifacts to be dusted, and programs. I have a heavy heart at the method which is being used, I think. We don't want to pit groups against each other. And if we want to have a cultural center, we should all work together, all the groups. And our function might be different from an acting function or a stage function. And our purposes are different. But we all are drawing from the same audience. And to hear someone say, oh, the museum shouldn't have any money anymore, it should go to... That's not what we should be doing. We should be all working together because we want to make this community better, and we do want to have a cultural center. And the museum is willing to work. I remember sitting in board meetings saying, well, we'd like to meet with the whole town board. That never happened. So that's all I have to say, and I hope it comes to a good resolution for the entire community.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Cassidy, and I'm a trustee of the Southeast Museum. I know most of you, and I just want to second Joan's comments that I'm absolutely on board working with all of you. So let's make this all great, okay? Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Anything else on the 2020 budget? See no hands? Entertain a motion?
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
All in favor? Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for coming for that portion.
Take a quick
Okay.
recess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, next item on the agenda. Before we open that item on discussion, make a motion to go into work session. Okay, we're going to take a 1-minute recess as people leave.
Second.
Second.
Favor?
I'll second.
Okay, make a motion to come out of the, come out of recess?
Yes, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, is there any, at our last meeting, there was residents that wanted to speak to the paving of the roads. Is there anybody here to speak to the paving of the roads? Okay, because if you were here, I was gonna let you come up because the superintendent of highways is here to answer your questions. So now it's just his show, so to speak. So next is the discussion of town highway superintendent, paving the roads, et cetera.
Mike?
I didn't actually excuse me, look behind me to see if there was anyone here to discuss that, was there?
No.
Nobody raised their hand.
So what would you like me to do? I was asked here to come here to answer concerns of the residents.
And they're not here tonight.
Right.
They were informed that you would be here, and no one's here, so you're gonna pass on that.
We got a hand.
aspect.
We do have,
I have a question for the highway superintendent.
Okay, sir, if you would come up to the,
Doesn't involve the paving.
okay, then let him speak, and we'll get you in a bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, as I said, I was here to answer their concerns, and I'm not sure what their concerns are at this point. Certainly the understanding was that there was some discontent for a short period of time about some fiber matting that we did on approximately 9 miles of road this year. I was here to attest to the validity of that practice, and I wasn't prepared to do a general presentation. I think I did that to the board's satisfaction back in January or February when we were working on our 284 agreement, and the town board approved the process that I instituted.
Hi, Mike. I've got notes from that last meeting, and just some of the things that they asked about. I think that they were concerned because of loose gravel, and there were no loose gravel on the edges. And then when they had sweepers going up and down Dingle Ridge, they thought that the sweepers that were trying to help remediate the situation with the loose gravel were now digging into the fiber mat that was there and was reinstating the holes that were that the fiber mat was supposed to solve.
I think if that was a concern, I wish that you had brought that to my attention before the meeting tonight. I would have been happy to go out and look.
Oh, okay.
It's my,
No,
general,
I'm just...
my general belief that there was no damage to anything. I didn't inspect every square inch that we did, but I did the vast majority of it. And it all seems to have done exactly what we did. There is some loose gravel that remains on the surface that doesn't get rolled into the hot asphalt during the process. And it's just a part of the general process. And yes, we do use our sweeper. We pick up that gravel after a few days to a week once the base is hardened to a point where it won't damage the base by sweeping. And then we stockpile the gravel and utilize it for other purposes throughout the year.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up because no one's here, but this was something that they asked about. Another thing was...
Did I answer that to your satisfaction?
Oh, yeah, it's good.
Oh, okay.
Line markings, have they been instituted? They were supposed to either be center or on the shoulders?
They have. We've done all, I believe all the painting. I didn't verify that every road was done, but earlier this week we painted both center lines and fog lines on a variety of different roads. And it's my understanding that they're all complete.
Okay.
And just so you know, Mike I had questions directly also from constituents, and you and I spoke, so I got back to them. That might be one other reason they're not here. I mean, I told them that you were going to paint.
My suspicion is that the reason they aren't here is that the end result was
better than they
a
thought.
very good result. And there can be a couple of days, as we are aware, and there's a price to pay for the value of the product that we use. It's about a fifth the price of blacktop, but as we discussed earlier, blacktop will, if you could put 2.5-inch cap of blacktop over the roads that we did with the fiber mat, that process will hold the road together with the asphalt and the fiberglass, where if you did a blacktop surface at 5 times the cost, within a year or two it's going to mirror the finish that was on the previous roadway. That's why that process was carefully selected, not because it was cheap, because it was the best process for the roads that and the condition of the roads that we have. And additionally, I use it a lot on hills where we can. It provides a permanent, very high traction surface due to the aggregate, the gravel aggregate that remains on the surface, which also creates small pockets that maintain the liquid salt in the wintertime and help desalt rather than have an extremely polished, smooth blacktop surface.
Thanks.
So,
thank you.
okay.
Okay, there's one other gentleman, you wanted to ask a question, Highway Superintendent?
I do.
Okay.
Good evening, I'm Tom Boycineau. I'm a resident of the village, and I'm also a trustee in the village. The commuter parking area was removed on Sodom Road. There's no parking there now. And I was called by many people, and frankly, I park there on occasion. And I was wondering, because I didn't see any minutes that the board had approved this, so I guess I'm asking, is that parking area going to stay no parking? I don't know what went wrong. I do know that this morning I was sitting at the intersection there, and a person put their left turn signal on and is parking across from Sodom Road on the dirt road, and they actually slowed to a stop on Route 22 to make the left. And I think we're going to get somebody hurt. And I'm wondering, was there board approval? Was there public comment wanted? Or I don't know why this happened, and I guess while you're here, I guess I'm asking you what the reasoning behind it was, and is it going to be permanent?
Yes, it is going to be permanent. The reason for it was really rather obvious. The errant parking in the area that you referenced on Sodom Road has been problematic for a long time, up to and including the inability to plow snow there in the winter, inability to mow the sides of the road in the summer because there are always cars parked there. The gross amount of litter that's created there essentially from the people who park there. If you drive by between 5:30 and 6:30 in the morning when most of those people are parking there, and I've even stopped and asked people to cease this extremely unsafe practice of parking on the wrong side of the road to pick up another person who is dropping, they're meeting there to pick up. They park on the opposite side of the road with their headlights shining into the oncoming traffic, and no one has ever made an attempt to stop doing that. I saw it up to the point a week ago before we placed those signs in that area to make the area safe. Can also address your concern about people driving through a well-posted intersection that clearly says right turn only, you have to turn south on Route 22 towards 684. It is illegal to go straight across to Old Milltown Road or make a left on Route 22 North. Certainly the placement of the no parking signs has nothing to do with people now illegally parking on the watershed department parking areas, but I think there may have been a residual effect from the placement of the signs but certainly we're no more responsible for what people do than if they pulled up and ran the stop sign and had a head-on accident. So there's no bearing on the safety of the public based on the fact that we put in no parking zones.
Videographer, are you getting this on, can you hear this well enough for the?
I hear him.
Okay,
Yeah.
just come up, just ask your question closer.
I mean, in one case, you're saying it's against the law to make a left there. And or go straight. Or go straight. And then the other way you're saying it's against the law for people to park on the wrong side of the street, but they're doing it. I think we want to promote commuting. I think we have an area, if you drive by there right now, at first I said, you know what, it is a messy area. People do dump trash there. I personally have cleaned up there. But I'm wondering if you were to go up there right now, you'd see that trash is still there, because you get a lot of gentlemen or people that are coming back from work early, and they sit there and wait out their time before they go to work, and they throw their stuff out, go back home. They throw their stuff out the window. So the trash problem is always going to be there. It's unfortunate. I wish it wasn't there. But I don't think that not bringing the community into this decision, I don't think it was a good idea. I think that there are a lot of people that use that area to go into the city, to go to work, to earn a living. And part of the, one of the perks of the area is to be able to commute and park there. And I think bringing this to the town and the people of the town first would have been appropriate, so you can get some feedback rather than just closing it. No offense, I don't want to fight with anybody about this, but I still think promoting commuting is what we want. And I think there are fixes for other things. You could put a sign up there that says no parking the first Tuesday of every month in the summer and mow. You could do many things to remediate the area. As far as plowing, I've been parking there for 15 years. The plowing has never been a problem, and we've had some pretty rough winters.
I think one of your questions was to the board, and if we approved it. I don't think we did. And do we need to approve no parking? I thought that, because I thought we did a public hearing when we did the no parking signs by the village.
I checked the minutes, and that's the first thing. I said, wow, I missed a whole meeting on this, or I missed, I'm sorry, but was there a meeting? Do we know of anything?
It was not done.
No, we had one on Railroad Avenue down by Diverting Trail,
Yes.
because that's been, and thank you, Mike, that's been very successful so far. So does this have to go back? And I wish Will were here, but.
I mean,
It would have to come to the board, it would have to come to the board for an approval.
So is it your purview? I'm pretty sure,
No,
like in the village, when
superintendent
we
of highways
changed
can
the
make,
parking code, it's.
superintendent of highways can make the appeal to the board in writing. Town attorney would write up a resolution, and we would determine it, I think it requires a public hearing as well.
And you guys would have to vote
Yes.
to make that no parking.
Yes.
So if anybody parks there and they receive a ticket,
It wouldn't
It's
count.
unenforceable.
If they're aware of the non-existence of the law, they would be excused when they got into court.
If they watch this video, they'll know.
I'm sorry, I don't want to get into the middle of a fight or anything.
No fight.
But I think the village and the town, we do a lot of things together, and this was one of those things that we did well together. Having an area over there that commuters can park is smart. It's great for the environment. It's a good thing to do. And I think all of these issues that Mr. Bruin are raising we can work through. I can't make people, stop breaking the law, but I can say when something is inherently dangerous, we should think it over.
When I was back on the legislature years ago, over 8 years at this point in time, that area was designated by the county to be made a park and ride. And for some strange reason, it just never came to fruition. Others did come forward, like where the old Delwood building, I don't know, what's that, Enviro Waste over there? That one was put in. There was one at the 312 entrance by Home Depot. There's one there as well. And I think there's one other, that was a location they wanted one, but it never went in. So maybe you can ask the county to consider it. If you want, we can forward it and ask them if they want to consider it.
As I say, it's a perfect area. You can get right on the highway there. I wish it was a little safer getting on the highway there, but I think people are pretty accustomed to doing it the right way. And as I said, it complements the area and it promotes carpooling, which is something
So do you want to write the letter to county, or you want us to write it? I'd rather you.
How about we,
would
would you like, I can write the
Well,
letter, or I can, I
do it together.
No, you want to do it, I will forward a letter to the county, making them aware of the interest, ask what happened initially with the initial request, and would they be interested in doing something? Because it'd be something done by the county and not the town.
Okay, that's terrific, thank you.
I'll do that.
I appreciate the time.
Okay.
As a follow-up, I think that if you do go by there tomorrow, you will find that all litter's already been picked up, because for the first time in years it's been accessible, and I did have all the litter removed, and I don't feel that any of that will return. I think you may have touched on a subject that is worth looking into, in that we do desperately need park and rides. But that was never a designated park and ride. What it was essentially a place where a couple people decided that they would park on the side of the road, regardless of the legality of that. And it grew to a point where there were an extreme number of cars in an area, and it really does pose a plowing problem. That's why, at this point in time, that's why we addressed it. So. Thank you for your concerns, but I think that what we should do is look into areas that can safely off the road be designated as park and rides, and it would be a huge benefit to the community.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, next is discussion special permit renewal, Barrett Hill. Sorry for the delay, gentlemen. But your stenographer didn't leave, she's staying. Now, we do apologize. Never know how long a public hearing will take.
Good evening. As you know, Richard O'Rourke from the law firm of Keenan Bean, here on behalf of Barrett Hill Associates LLC. With us this evening is Mr. Harold Lepler from Covington and Mr. John Bain-Lardy from Wilder Walter Partners, who are obviously the folks most affected by the special permit and what we're trying to accomplish. If I
Can
may.
I just interrupt just for 1 second? The town has its outside representative from AKRF, Ashley Lai, to help the town board in this discussion in this matter.
Very good.
Thank you.
And I note that it's on for discussion, and I think the important thing is to point out, and I know the board has seen the letter that I wrote on September 12th, which sets forth the law in connection with a request for an extension of special permit. And I know we had sort of an animated discussion about that the last time. But subsequent to that, there were some issues that were raised in terms of when was it that the water company was sold to New York American Water.
And you proved that, and I was wrong in my timing. I can't believe how time flies, but it was not the length of time I thought.
That's okay. I just wanted to clarify that, and obviously based upon the documentation, as you know, it was 4 or 5 years ago, and not as recently as that some of you may have thought.
And
But-
it also identified the fact there was enough water for the project.
I'm sorry?
And it also identified the fact there was water for the
Yes, at that time.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
I will concede that, and I apologize. I'm getting older than I thought. Time flies, man.
I'm not looking for an apology. I'm looking for a special permit. That's,
Well, then you
I mean,
know.
let's face it. All right. So anyway, here we are. I obviously sent that letter, and of September 12th, I sent the follow-up letter, and I think that the letter of October 4th, 2019, not only clarified some of the perhaps misunderstandings, shall we say, in terms of the ownership of the company, gave you background with respect to New York American Water, which of course provides water to over 370,000 people. They are obviously a very sophisticated company, acquired this water system for the purpose of servicing the residents of the town of Southeast. And as you know, just like any other utility that provides services in a town, whether it is water or gas or electric, or for that matter, cable TV, you know, there is an obligation on the part of those companies to provide the services. If NYSEG loses a power transmission line, it has to be replaced. If New York American Water has a problem in terms of sufficient flow of water, it has an obligation to fix that. And as I discussed and mentioned the last time, for many years I've represented Heritage Hills of Westchester, both water and sewer. Over the last 35 years, wells go out, new wells are drilled. The obligation continues because the permissive service area has been defined by the town. The Public Service Commission has, of course, approved that permissive service area and has also approved the rates. So here we are tonight. We have a circumstance, a situation where, yes, there was a problem in terms of water supply. There was an issue in terms of wells. We now know, because, and you know, based on my letter of October 4th to the board, I attached to that letter, and which of course you have as part of your record, the letter that was received from WSP from Michael Short-Trell. And that letter, and I would just like to read this in pertinent part, New York American intends to supply the proposed Barrett Hill development from the Mount Ebo system. However, New York American is requiring that Barrett Hill fund a water exploration with the intent of drilling a new bedrock water supply well that will be used to augment the existing water supply and serve the proposed Barrett Hill development. Done deal. We are having the well will be drilled. We are contributing to its getting completed, and obviously that is something that New York American Water, pursuant to its franchise agreement, permissive service area understanding, and authorizations from the New York State Public Service Commission, the water is going to be there. That seemed to be, I thought, the issue of how could it be that the board could or could not extend the special permit issuance. I don't know what else I can do other than to tell you what I've said before, and now which is documented, that in fact the utility has to service us. We can't get a building permit. I mean, we can't get a certificate of occupancy unless there's water, and we recognize that. So again, I'm lost and I'm confused in terms of what legal basis there may be for not extending the special permit. The board recognizes, and everyone knows what it costs to get an approval on a project when you're talking about 168 units. There have been expenditures, if I go back to 2006, we're talking millions of dollars. We talk just about what we've been doing with the special permit extension. It's over $500,000. I'm confused. On what basis is there for us, or for you, not to extend the special permit?
Ashley, would you like to help? And my only question is, what would be the difference by waiting?
I'm sorry?
What would be the difference by waiting until we know we have water?
By waiting. There are financiers for this. You can't.
But you have to have water to move forward, do you not?
We have to have a special permit.
Okay, after you get your special permit,
what's the
it
basis
takes
of denial?
No, it would take 2 weeks, 2 weeks between meetings from here to the planning board to get it approved. I don't know what the deal is. What is it?
That's not the question. The question is, why not grant the special permit as a matter of law?
Okay, let's see what Ms. Ashley Lai says.
So the granting of a new special permit is an action that is covered by seeker. The town board served as lead agency for the previous review of the application, and as part of that initial review, it was demonstrated at that point in time that there was sufficient water, and that was part of the basis of the original negative declaration. At this point in time, we know that there is not water currently available. We know it is being explored. The planning board granted a wetland permit application in September to allow the well testing to go forward. It is my recommendation that the town board wait to grant the special permit until that well testing is complete, and that action and the safe yield that's established through the well testing be memorialized in an amended negative declaration should they be able to determine that there is sufficient water supply and that no adverse impacts to the nearby wells would result from that new well. That all be included in a new negative declaration and future special permit approval. So it's my recommendation that the board wait until that well testing be done.
Mr. O'Rourke?
With all due respect, and I've known Ashley a very long time, and she's an excellent planner, but as you know, she's not a lawyer. The issue is this, and if one were to take a look at the secret handbook, you will note that there has to be a situation where there are project changes which could change the lead agency's identification and assessment of likely significant adverse environmental impacts. I haven't heard anything. Excuse me, I didn't interrupt you.
Oh, wait,
I did not interrupt.
Don't look. I think she was not interrupted intentionally, but she wanted to make a comment. But go ahead, Rick. Finish. Just don't lose your thought, Ashley.
All right. So the point of it all is this: we have an approval. We will have water. If we don't have water, then we don't get a building permit. We don't get a certificate of occupancy. But the approvals must be in place. There is not a legitimate, lawful reason that I have heard for you not to extend this special permit.
No one said that we were not.
You're getting a recommendation here that we have to go through SECRA and we have to do some kind of an analysis. The analysis is done.
You don't think that? You don't have to do that?
Absolutely not. We have to get approvals from the health department. We can't get an approval from the health department until this water company that has been empowered by you and by the Public Service Commission and is mandated to provide us with water. We have to have that. And so the burden's not on you, the burden is on them. But insofar as holding us up for no legitimate reason, I have not heard a lawful reason why you cannot extend this special permit. To amend a negative declaration, there's nothing to amend. The water has to be there. If a well goes out, the well is replaced. That's it. So what's the reason? Why would you do this? Why would you do it unless there's some ulterior motive that you don't like this application? I don't know. But I haven't heard a lawful reason yet.
I'm telling you now, back when, I voted no at that time.
That's understandable.
And
I respect that.
My opinion hasn't changed. So Ashley, do you feel you can answer the question? Our legal counsel this evening is not here. We can let him hear the tape and, give a legal opinion, or do you feel you can answer, but just stay within your realm of your expertise, if you would?
Well, listen,
The specific section of the seeker law that does allow
Just come up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the specific section is 617.7 in parentheses E, and what it specifically allows is for a lead agency to amend or rescind, and rescind would be part F, a negative declaration when new information is discovered. Specifically, any time prior to its decision to undertake, fund, or approve an action, a lead agency, at its discretion, may amend a negative declaration when substantive new information is discovered or changes in circumstances related to the project arise that were not previously considered. And in this instance, the insufficient capacity of the existing water supply system and the necessity for additional wells is both new information and a change in circumstance related to the project. As lead agency, the town board must consider this new information in its review of the special permit under seeker. So I'm not saying that the board can't continue to review this application. I think that the board could go ahead and schedule a new public hearing on the special permit. That's something you could continue to do while the well testing is underway. The applicant has said that the well testing was going to be occurring in the fall of 2019, so I'm assuming that's starting any day now.
Yes, sir.
So your recommendation is we have a public hearing?
Right, that you can schedule the public hearing, you can move forward with processing the special permit application, but that you not vote to approve the special permit until the well testing is complete and a safe yield has been established.
Would that suffice, Mr. O'Rourke?
I'm sorry?
Would that suffice if we move forward as recommended?
I disagree vehemently. I'm going to tell you why. I'll tell you why. Whenever you go through a secret process, and even if we had a positive declaration, we did a DEIS, FEIS final statement, a finding statement adopted, and then there is an approval for a special permit and a site plan, guess what? You don't have health department approval at that point. You don't have it. And guess what? You have to go and get it. And you have to get your water, and you have to get your sewer. There's no need for another public hearing. Either we get the water or we don't. It's as simple as that. For us to have to go through a public hearing, you're going to have to notice this, and you're causing a delay, and I have yet to hear a reason for that. If, in fact, we had gone through an entire environmental review process, DEIS, FEIS, finding statement, and this were to occur, the only alternative you would have would be to open up an entire secret process and order a supplemental environmental impact statement for something that is not required. It is not required. We have to have water. It's not, I don't have the ability to do this. With all due respect, you don't either. There's a third party, an independent third party that has an obligation, an affirmative obligation to provide us with water. That's the control. We're not going to be able to do anything until and unless those agencies that are charged with the responsibility of making sure that there's adequate supply of water. Under that set of circumstances, there's no reason for us to have to go through another public hearing before this.
Okay, I don't believe that, I'll get you in a second, actually. I don't believe this town board is causing this delay. There was ample opportunity, there was a time limit with the special permit, it expired, you explained the reason why. We buy that argument, but it's not on this town board that's delaying this. We're taking our recommendation from our outside vendors and their recommendations, and that's what we deal with. But I don't believe we're causing this delay.
So why can't...
That's more on the applicant, that they let it expire. I heard all the reasons why, you know, whatever, but you let it expire.
So you are, I've given you the case law in terms of that business, and we're entitled to have, if you're going to deny my extension, then deny my extension. The case law is clear. The case law is clear.
Well, we're going to check with our outside counsel. In the meantime, Ashley, would you like to respond?
I'd just like to clarify that the special permit has expired, and that's the trigger for the new public hearing. As with any other applicant where their special permit has expired, this board has held a new public hearing on the special permit as required by the Town of Southeast Code.
Rick, I apologize that...
I have to disagree with that, too.
Of course you would.
Seriously, with all due respect, I mean, I don't think you've ever had a circumstance, a situation like this where Go ahead.
I can give an example. We did this for State Line just last year. When their special permit and their site plan expired, you had a new public hearing on both their site plan and their special permit. It's been done for many applicants because that's what's required in the town code.
And New York State DOT put them through, you know what, the ringer.
I have not, no, forgive me. First of all, I don't think State Line had a circumstance that's similar to ours, where the reason that's being given for this not being extended has to do with water supply that's mandated as a matter of law. I mean, that's the issue. Right now, why is it that we must do this? I just don't get it. We're entitled to our special permit. Yes, it had expired, but as we explained, it wasn't like we waited an undue period of time. In fact, under the case law that I cited in my letter, we acted more rapidly than in another circumstance where the court said, of course, that they were entitled to a renewal of the special permit. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm trying to represent my client based upon what I understand the law to be and the fact that we are in a circumstance right now where I have yet to hear a reason why I cannot get this special permit extended.
Okay, again, based on what you're saying this evening, you have a stenographer here as well.
I do.
We will present this to the town attorney. When he comes back, we'll point this section, we'll have this tape probably in 2 days, so by Monday he can review it and let him make a recommendation to the board beside what Ashley is stating. Would that be sufficient?
Well, I'm just also curious. I was not aware of a provision in this town code that requires a public hearing before the reissuance of a site plan or special permit.
There is a public hearing requirement for any special permit that is granted by the town board, and because the special permit expired, that triggers the need for a new special permit.
Like the original, was the, does that?
Even in a circumstance where it's a ministerial act?
It expired, so it's a new special permit, so it needs a new public hearing.
So basically, we go back to square one with the special permit application and public hearing.
Correct.
Right.
You can rely on your original secret determination, but you need to take a look at it with fresh eyes based on any changes that have occurred since the original negative declaration was granted. In this case, it's the lack of water, which I think needs to be addressed. That's the only item that I think needs to be addressed before the board can reconsider the special permit.
I don't want to oversimplify this, but in my head, if I hear what you're saying, I hear what Mr. O'Rourke is saying. At the end of the day, let's just say we grant a special permit today, just for argument's sake. And if they don't have water by the time they're ready, I think to his point, then you don't get your certificate of occupancy, you don't get your building permit, you don't get what you need, you don't get your approval. So in my head, I don't understand why we can't actually just, never mind that, we might have to have another public hearing because it expired and it's in our town code. But forget about all that. Just to try to simplify for me, why couldn't we just say yes? And then if he doesn't get it, he doesn't get his approval. I mean, at the end of the day.
So specifically, my concern is related to the potential impacts of the new wells, which would be brought online to serve this project. Part of the well testing is to do a 72-hour pump test where you look at all of these wells running simultaneously to make and you monitor existing wells within the system, wetlands, surface water resources, to make sure that while the 72-hour pump test is running, that those other resources aren't being negatively impacted by this new well being brought online. So that is something that would be established during the well testing, the 72-hour pump test, which is supposed to be occurring any day now. And through that process, we would establish whether that new well has enough capacity, whether it would potentially impact any of these resources. And once that's been established, then I think the board will have the basis to make that determination. But I think that's the information, that's the piece that we really need to wait for.
And I would, can I say something? Please?
I have to correct something, but go ahead. No, this is a total misstatement, because all of that was just talked about is the health department. That's not part of a secret review for this planning board in terms of special permit. Of course there's going to be a 72-hour pump test. Of course there's going to be the monitoring. That has to occur, not because you have to schedule a public hearing, not because you have to reopen secret. That's part of the approval process. That is not the reason why you have to reopen secret. That is wrong. All of those obligations, that's health department regulations.
I am very uncomfortable if we treat any applicants differently. And and I know because I sit through planning board meetings that we did indeed reopen a public hearing for State Line. In addition, I have a constituent who has attended some of the meetings and is concerned and lives at Fieldstone and is concerned about her water and water out there. And yes, although you're assuring us that this will all be done and taken care of, I want to do due diligence on this. I mean, I don't think, and when you come back, and it's not just you, when applicants come back and complain to us how much the process costs, that's the cost of doing business. That's not, it shouldn't sway this board. I mean, it shouldn't sway us. We have to look out for future residents. And I want to make sure, I care what the Board of Health says, but to me, it behooves us to look out for future residents and make sure the water's there. I don't want if you come back and say, oh, we can't get the water, we can't find the water we need. Now we have to put up a bigger water tank, things change a lot, and it's very important to me that our residents have clean, potable water and enough of it. So those are my concerns, and I don't want to treat applicants differently.
If I may just respond. You're suggesting that those assurances are not going to be achieved through the health department. That's what you just said. You're saying you want to have the assurances for the residents that the water supply is going to be okay. Well, that's why you have a health department. They're the ones, not AKRF, not you, not me, not the applicant. Those tests are done. The assurances that you respond to, we all share. And guess what? That is what the health department does. That's why they have such stringent standards and protocols that have to be followed. We cannot get water until everything that Ashley says is done. But that's done through the health department anyway. That's the assurance. Why, if this is the issue, what are we going to accomplish by opening up the SECRA process and having yet another public hearing when we've identified this as the issue and we recognize and know that obviously this third-party organization has an obligation to provide us potable water, and we also know we're not going to get it until that 72-hour pump test occurs. There's well monitoring that occurs. If the town has a problem in terms of the way the health department is conducting this, or you have some suggestions, fine. Tell them to go monitor other wells as well. That's fine. But I have yet to hear, just because we did it sometime before, that doesn't answer the question.
Well, I am in favor of consistency, and I do believe if some of us never wanted to be lead agency on this and would have been much happier having the planning board do it. But it was the will of this board at the time that we become lead agency. And in my opinion, we should be consistent, and we should not, we should absolutely reopen SECR and have a public hearing. When this happened for State Line, not one person showed up to speak. But that doesn't mean there aren't concerns here. And we were assured back in the day that there was water and everything was fine, and now there isn't. The circumstances have greatly changed, in my opinion. It's only my opinion. But I really do believe that Ashley's been very persuasive in her arguments, for me anyhow. And as you know, I didn't vote.
Okay, well, I know the law. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to tell me? So is that to say that you're going to schedule a public hearing on this?
Are you requesting one?
Of course not. I'm asking you for a special permit tonight, because I've yet to hear a reason why one's not being granted.
I think Ashley gave us reasons to consider being cautious and going forward, and she's our consultant, and she's cited reasons. Just because you have case law, I believe some of the things that she has posited are shown in our town code to guide us as to whether we should proceed in granting a special permit.
I will ask the town attorney, like I said earlier, he'll probably be back on Monday. He's away for a few days. I will ask him on Monday to review this tape and give you an opinion, what the town should do moving forward. Would that satisfy you for the time being, Mr. O'Rourke, or no? Would that be fine?
Mr. Benlari would like to say something.
Good evening. Just so we're all aware of what's been going on with this water system, the system was failing in the sense that there was a reduction in the capacity and the yield of the system as a whole, serving the existing users of the Mount Ebo water supply. That was recognized. The Department of Health is jurisdiction, as does the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, because the system exceeds 100,000 gallons. That's a threshold in which the DEC has the obligation and the jurisdiction for issuing a water taking permit, and they are involved in the redevelopment of the existing system. That redevelopment has been going on now for more than 18 months. We first became aware of it, I think when your board first became aware of it, and possibly the planning board, when they announced that there was an issue with the water system. So, and there's two different things that are going on with the system. One, there's an obligation by the water supplier, in this case Mount Ebro Water, which is owned by New York American Water, to provide water to everyone who's in the permissible area of which this property is, as well as all the additional users. And then if there's a problem with capacity, then it's just a question of who has the obligation to pay. And that's just an economic thing that happens between the developer and the water control, the water supplier, under yet another administrative body, which is the Public Service Commission. So there's a lot of eyes on this, and there have been a lot of eyes on this for quite some time. We recognize that there's a concern and worries by the existing users that they're not going to be impacted, but we're also a user of the system. And in many ways, our interests are aligned with the existing users. While all of this has been going on, New York American Water has wanted to delay a final determination because they wanted to get through their redevelopment program. Because in the end, they may actually have enough water in the system to service without the need for an additional well. We're trying to move forward with the construction and financing of this project. We're not in a position to wait. What we've offered is to go and find another test well, and maybe more than one test well. This test well will not only potentially come online in the future, if determined by the water company to be necessary to serve Barrett Hill. It may be determined that it never needs to come online. But this will provide some buffer for the overall health of the system. We've been told in the letter which was provided by council by WSP, the consultant for New York American Water, is that the redevelopment program has gone very well. They still have one well left in the process, and they've had to take a well offline, hydrofrack it, 72-hour pump test it, and do the Part 5 labs, which it's the safety of the well, right? That is reviewed by the Department of Health, and then the DEC has the overall jurisdiction for the system. They've had to do a well, take it offline, hydrofrack it, demonstrate that what the new capacity is, prove out that the labs are safe before that well could then be put back into the system, approved by the DEC and the Department of Health, before they can move on to the testing of the next well. So that's the process that's been going on. They're now at a point where they're satisfied that they've established adequate water to serve the existing customers' peak demand, which is 116 gallons a minute, or 114 gallons a minute, with the best well out of service. The best well out of service is the Fieldstone well that they've recently brought online, which is a well that provides over 40 gallons a minute. So with that well not being calculated, they've already determined now that they have an adequate water to serve the existing users. There's also the high likelihood that there's additional water that could be used to serve anybody who's new coming into the system, i.e. Barrett Hill. It may be, when we're all said and done, that there will be adequate water without the need for additional wells. We've now committed to dig this test well. To get this test well dug, with all of the administrative process, the design, getting access to drill the well, and then the well driller, the 72-hour pump test that'll be ultimately be required, and the labs, it's going to cost over $200,000. We're spending that money, understanding that the well may never be necessary. But we're doing that for our own interests, but also for the overall interests of the health of the system, of which we're a part. So this well that's going to get dug is essentially going to provide some additional buffer beyond what's already there and has already been proven out. So that's just kind of the background of what's been going on over the course of the last year and a half. As you're aware, when you issued your special permit, we had to go, we were back and forth between your board and the planning board. We went back to the planning board as the process required after you issued your special permit to apply for our final site plan approval. As part of that process, the planning board asked that we try to get to the finish line, or as close to the finish line as we could, with the DEP on the stormwater. That process took an extensive period of time to get through. We now have a stormwater system that's vastly improved from what was originally approved in 2006 under the prior regs. Hundreds of thousands of dollars to get through that process as well, which we did in good faith, in reliance upon the permit that this board issued. Regardless of whether or not at the end of the day, any one individual board member agreed with the zoning change or didn't agree with the zoning change or likes the development that's proposed or not is kind of irrelevant, because the environmental review process that you went through resulted in the zoning change, the mapping of this property, and our use is a permissible use under your law. And our use is 100% zoning compliant. No variance is required for this development. Nothing else has changed. The only thing that has changed is we've now gone, since this period of time, gone through a lot of other third-party agency review in reliance on the permit to get to the finish line. We're now there. The extension of this permit really is a ministerial act. There's nothing here new that's changed. There's no new information that's an environmental concern based upon the facts that have just been stated. And certainly, if this board were to determine to reopen seeker, which we just do not agree with, that's appropriate here, certainly wouldn't be appropriate to look at the project as a whole. The only thing that would be appropriate under that circumstance, if you were to consider to do it, would be to look at the water issue. There's no other issue to study or to revisit. We've been through multiple processes before the public and extensive public hearings on both the rezoning and on the site plan review. So, I'd ask that you consider all of that when you're ultimately making your determination. I think council needs to weigh in on this, because I think that's where this needs to rise or fall. But I hope you will consider where we've been in this process. It's been a long time for us as a property owner here. We haven't simply folded up our tents and walked away from our obligations on this site. We've been paying taxes all these years, and we're trying to bring some needed housing to the community in accordance with the laws that have been adopted. So I hope you would consider that as you make your final determination.
Now, are you saying, I took from what you said, and I had to go back and read the minutes exactly because I spoke for a while. Are you saying that as a town board member, we don't have a right to say no to a special permit?
No, I think you have to have a basis for saying no, not that you don't agree with the law, right? So you can't simply say, I don't really like the law, so I'm not going to follow it. It's not a basis. It's not a legitimate basis for saying no. Now, when this board voted on the special permit, 3-2, right? The fact that there were 2 no votes had no real impact other than a political statement that you didn't agree, okay? But once the law was passed, a no vote on the special permit without a basis tied back to the law or an environmental reason is not legitimate.
Well, I'm going to look into that one. I don't believe you can force anybody to vote for something they don't want to. So I'll take issue with that.
You have to follow your own laws.
Well,
And
So the law, you're saying to me, the law says I have to vote for something, even if I don't want to vote for it.
let's say somebody
And
came
what's the
in,
sense of that? Why do you need a special permit?
the special
if you don't-
special permit has objective criteria set forth in the law, which we've met.
Well, I have objective criteria as well, but that's beside the point. Let me ask you a couple of quick questions while you're there.
Sure.
What entity do you represent?
Wilder Balcher Partners.
Okay, they're the ones making.
Wilder
development.
Balcher Partners is a
I know.
partner
Okay.
in Barrett Hill
I need
Associates.
WB, I would, the
Yes.
old days used to mean what,
Warner
Warner
Brothers?
Brothers?
No, yes.
So, okay. Do you have any idea, or the companies involved, any idea why was there a reduction in the system? What caused it?
They're not really sure. I think in part, what we've been told is in any of these systems is if you don't maintain the wells or you overtax the wells over time, they don't produce the capacity that they were previously producing. So, you need to go in, you need to hydrofrack these wells from a period of time, from time to time. You need to have a maintenance system and process that's in place and making sure that the operator is cycling these wells, not always pumping from the same well. This particular water company has, very good experience with this. By the way, they've now had to spend quite a bit of money. It's their obligation to do so, to make sure that the water is being produced to meet the needs of their users who are paying for it and who are entitled to it under the law. So we've really tried in good faith to do our part. One, to make sure that the overall system is healthy, because it's in our best interest as well to have a healthy water system. It's no benefit to us to go and spend $50 million building 168 apartments to then not have water. Nobody in their right mind is going to do that, and we're all singing from the same song sheet and making sure that happens, and that happens correctly. I've been personally involved, not just in this particular project, but in creating and developing private water systems off of wells on multiple sites, in Westchester County and others. So I have, I'm not a hydrogeologist, but I can do my fair share in understanding the process. So and we've been in communication with New York American Water nonstop, trying to push this forward for the benefit of the overall system and for our own interests as well.
Okay, just on myself, again, unfortunately, counsel was not here. I don't know if he could actually respond to you immediately without looking up aspects of the law. He will return. I will ask him on Monday to look into the situation and make a recommendation to town board, and we will get back to Mr. O'Rourke and let you know his opinion.
If I may, I just want to make one note. Insofar as the work that's been done on this well field, it's my understanding this was originally done by Leggett, Brashears, and Graham, which is a very preeminent hydrogeology, water system engineering company, and they are now part of WSP USA, which is the successor to Leggett, Brashears, and Graham. So they have institutional knowledge in terms of what was done originally and is being conducted presently. So you couldn't get a much better organization to do it. So.
Anyone else on the town board? Any comment, questions? Rick, we'll get back to you as soon as Mr. Stevens returns.
Ashley, did you want to say anything more?
No, I was just waiting in case the board had any more questions.
Nope, we're good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We're going to move now from the work session to the regular meeting. I waive the reading of the correspondence.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the voucher list, $1,391,310.44. So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Setting of meeting dates and public hearings. All meetings to be held at 1360 Route 22 at 7 p.m. unless otherwise noted. Thursday, November 7th, 2019. Thursday, November 21st, 2019. So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Waive the reading of the budget transfer. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 5, resolution authorizing waiver of fees for marriage licenses for certain military personnel.
Second.
Nope, let me read it. You may not want to say yes when I'm
That's right,
done.
he has to read it.
I thought you were
Okay.
seconding so
I
you
know,
can
I know,
read
it's
it.
getting late. You have to be that patient.
Okay. Resolved that as contemplated by Chapter 177 of 2019 of the laws of the state of New York, the town board of the town of Southeast hereby authorizes the town clerk to issue marriage licenses without charging the statutory fee when either party to the marriage is an active duty member of the United States Armed Forces, and be further resolved that the town clerk shall require satisfactory proof upon application for such license that a party to such marriage is an active duty member of the United States Armed Forces by exhibiting documentary evidence that he or she is in the military full-time. Members of the National Guard or reservists are not eligible for this waiver unless that person can establish that he or she has been called or deployed for active duty service. So move for discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 6, basically, is the supervisor's financials report. We spent quite a bit of time on the budget this evening, so there's no need for the presentation. We're still short revenues with the courts, and everything else in the budget seems to be pretty much in balance.
How many more months before we're out of the year? Or
John?
No, I'm just wondering, how do we look with the contingency budget? Do we still
No,
have
we're good.
funds? Okay.
We're good, yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
There was, because
We have-
contingency was brought up this evening.
Yes,
that's why
it
I
is,
just wanted-
and, you know, we dipped into it for unexpected expenses, like we had stated earlier, not exactly, but it's all within the details in there.
Okay.
And if we don't have enough there, there's always reserve, but we don't want to try to go into that.
Okay,
Usually contingency, we usually put enough in the contingency to make it work.
And we're good.
We're good
Thank you.
at the moment, except for revenues from the courts.
Okay.
Okay, recognition of public. Recognition of the board.
I have something.
Oh.
It's going to be really fast, and thank God Christine is here. I went to a meeting at the village board. It seems like a lifetime ago.
No, it was only yesterday.
It was only yesterday. We discussed I went to hear the Department of Transportation discuss the bridge that will be going in on Route 6 over the much-needed bridge over by the firehouse and over the Metro North tracks. I just went on their website today, which said it would be done by October 31st, 2020, but it was last night they gave us, was it March of 2021?
Their official date is the end of November 2020, but weather
Right.
contingencies
Right, okay.
they require to go over, and it wasn't a board meeting, it was a special.
I'm sorry, it was
meeting
yeah.
To the members of our constituency who live in proximity.
Right, and very nicely, the DOT offered us the plan, which is on a big board in the back. So if anyone wants to take a look at it, it's very, very helpful, showing exactly where the bridge will go and who will gain property, although it will belong to New York State. And the firehouse was there asking about possibly acquiring some of that land. So it was a very short but very, it was a very good meeting. It was very helpful.
Mr. Cheney, is that available at the Village Hall for people to review? The drawing?
No, I've got.
No.
You have a copy.
I know, I'm asking, is,
And yes, there is an
okay.
original copy in the Village Hall.
So if you'd like to see a copy, you can go to the Village Hall or come here to Town of Southeast and we'll let you review the plan.
And I'm under the impression that it will end up on the website as well.
Good.
In short order.
Okay,
Yeah, I asked for that, and they were very nice, very accommodating.
Good.
So it was a very good meeting.
anyone else?
No comment.
Okay, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to close tonight's meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming.